I see a headline in the Houston Chronicle in the hometown paper of the Titans owner saying she got what she deserved after the Titans lost to the JV Texans, I really sat there and wondered, how does that make her feel? Now, I can't tell you how it makes her feel, and I don't know how it would make me feel if I were in her position. So I'm not even going to try to assume how that makes her feel. But it made me think of something. I've heard a lot of people over the last couple of days when it comes to the Titans talking about what they're going to do at the end of the year with Mike Vrabel, and we know that this is a discussion regardless of if people think it's warranted or not. And it seems to me like most people seem to think Vrabel's safe. It's, oh no, Vrabel is absolutely safe. There is nothing to worry about with Vrabel. And sometimes I hear that and I wonder to myself, is that what you think or is that what you know? When I hear somebody say that Vrabel's safe, I think to myself, do you know Vrabel is safe or do you think Vrabel is safe? Even Diana Rossini, she's so in the bucket for Mike Vrabel, talking about the tomahawk steak dinner that he enjoyed on Saturday night as if she was actually at the restaurant with him, that it's really hard for me to know one way or another how ownership feels. And so as I was sitting there and I was reading the Houston Chronicle article, again, which probably doesn't matter to you, and it doesn't really matter to me, but again, that's not my hometown paper. I was not embarrassed in Houston Oiler uniforms with Earl Campbell as we put Billy White Shoes Johnson into the Ring of Honor on Sunday, and she was. I really wondered how that actually festered. In fact, the Chronicle writes, quote, Titans owner Amy Adams Strunk, whose father uprooted the Houston Oilers from the Bayou City in the 1990s, abandoning the team name in favor of the Titans shortly after, loves to talk about how Oilers history is Titans history. It's only fitting that on Oilers Day, the Houston Chronicle writes, in Tennessee, the Titans suffered an embarrassing collapse at the hands of Houston's current NFL team while donning the famed Columbia blue jerseys and Oil Derrick helmets. It's obviously personal. We've known that for a long time. It's personal when they give up a punt return in Houston and they lose and they fire the special teams coach, as was the case in 2016 when Bobby April got the axe after a bad Brett Kern punt led to a Will Fuller game-winning touchdown, and all of a sudden, the Titans had a new special teams coach. So I kept wondering today, again, with this headline in her hometown paper, with them pointing the finger at her and saying, ha, 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 after the Titans on Oilers Day got their asses spanked by a JV football Texans team. And I kept wondering, how do I think this would make Amy Adams Strunk feel? And finally, I got to this question that I don't know the answer to. Do they blame John Robinson for Sunday? It always feels like whenever we discuss why the Titans are in the state that they're in, it's almost as if it either has to absolutely be 100% John Robinson's fault or absolutely not 100% John Robinson's fault. And I don't believe that. I certainly think that by missing on Isaiah Wilson and missing on Dylan Radence and missing on Caleb Farley and missing on the A.J. Brown trade, I certainly think those things are egregious mistakes that added all together do hurt the football team. I don't think it makes it impossible to overcome. The 49ers in a 2-year period literally lit 4 first-round picks on fire. And they seem to be doing just fine. But again, Robinson wasn't perfect. And I think that if the results had been the same, had Robinson ended up, finishing the year last year as general manager and they had lost all those games in a row, I think we could have had a legitimate discussion about whether or not they should have fired him. Firing him in the middle of the season to me was ridiculous. But again, that goes back to how does ownership feel? We don't always know. But it seems to me whenever we talk about the state of the Titans, it's always like, oh, that's got to be Robinson's fault, or it's all Vrabel's fault, or it's all Rand Carthon's fault, or it's all this guy's fault, that guy's fault, this coach, that one. And I don't think that that's right. Do I think John Robinson hurt them by not having A.J. Brown on the football field on Sunday? Sure. But that's water under the bridge. John Robinson's been gone for a year. And the decision to draft Jalen Duncan, who was an all-time bad left tackle on Sunday, was not John Robinson's. The decision to play Jalen Duncan at left tackle, when it's obvious he was a developmental I'm not throwing Jalen Duncan under the bus here, but again, when it's like, oh, well, this team's so bad, are you expecting them to fix the roster in 1 year? I was expecting them to not give up more sacks than they gave up last year, this year, yes. That's what I was expecting. I don't know what you guys are. Was I expecting them to compete for the Super Bowl this year? No, I was not. But again, it's almost like anytime someone complains at all about the losing, it immediately goes back to Vrabel and Rand Carthon were given such a crap hole team that there's no way for you to expect them to do better than Dennis Daly last year. And that doesn't make any sense to me. But again, it's not about what I think. It's about what does she think. Some people think it is ridiculous to ask the Titans commission, the Rand Carthon and Mike Vrabel commission, that it is ridiculous to have asked them to improve the football team just a little bit from last year to this year, right? I mean, all I'm told is how bad of a state the roster was. I saw their left tackle. I saw their left guard, who they drafted 11th overall. I saw their $4.3 million center. I saw their right guard. Do I expect them to go out and get the hogs of the old Washington Redskin days? No, I don't. Did I expect them to be worse than last year on the line? No, I didn't. That's inexcusable. But it doesn't matter how I feel. It matters how Amy felt about the Texans getting the last laugh, not just at her football team, but at her with their junior varsity. And I don't know how she feels, and I'm not going to pretend to know how she feels. But the one thing I can say is I can't imagine that she particularly liked it. We saw when the Eagle fans turned around into her box and flipped the middle finger in there, that she immediately 2 days later fired the general manager. So I'm going to guess she didn't like that. I'm going to guess when they turned around and stuck their middle fingers up there, she didn't like it. Which takes me back to the headline in the Houston Chronicle, in her hometown paper, in a big game for them. Every year it's a big game when they play the Texans. It's more personal than any other game the Titans play every year. Why? Because the relationship between the city of Houston is personal with the ownership of the Titans. I'll be honest, the idea of the Texan fans that are all bent out of shape about the Titans wearing the Oiler jerseys and everything, I couldn't give a rat's ass about that. And I'm sure most of you don't care about it either. I mean, I get why they left. I get why Houston was mad at Bud Adams. It's not exactly how I would have solved the issues, but I understand it. They've got a team. They should be happy. We've got a team. We should be happy, and on we go. But that's not how it feels to the people of Houston. And again, as far as taking a game personal, clearly means something to her. And as we've seen in the past, it does not take long to change her mind. For all the people out there that say, well, Diana Rossini reported a month ago that they're not going to move on from Vrabel, and okay. But again, she gave John Robinson a contract extension. So for Isaiah Wilson and Julio Jones and all the mistakes outside of the A.J. Brown trade, every mistake that he had made had been done before she gave him a contract extension. She already knew the Julio trade wasn't going to work. She already knew that Isaiah Wilson was a bust, and she still gave him a contract extension. So as we've learned, it does not take long for her to change her mind. Not at all does it take her long to change her mind. And I do wonder how being embarrassed in her hometown paper where they're literally pointing a finger and laughing, I do wonder what effect that has on the situation with the coach that the Titans find themselves in now. And it all goes back to who gets the blame for what happened on Sunday. Not who gets the blame for the fact that you're not a Super Bowl contender this year. Not who gets the blame for Traylon Burks. Not who gets the blame for what happened on Sunday. Who gets the blame for losing to a JV Texan team because JoJo Domann gets called for holding on a punt? Who gets blamed for Will Levis's injury? Who gets blamed for the fact that the 11th overall pick at guard freaking sucks? Who gets blamed? And that's the question that nobody knows the answer to. I already see your phones at 615-737-1025, and I'm just going to tell you guys right now, you don't know. Just like I don't know. I have no idea how Amy feels. And I would think, I can't promise you this, but I would think any local media person who tells you how she thinks does not know what they're talking about because she doesn't talk. 615-737-1025 is our phone number. Again, embarrassed in the local paper. Texans give Titans and Amy Adams Strunk exactly what they deserve. 615-737-1025. Now, there is an issue with ownership here where a lot of people just assume is the case, and it might be. You might be right that ownership might be legitimately complicit for how terrible that offensive line is. A lot of people seem to think that. But ownership's going to have to understand one really, really important thing when it comes to spending money, because they're going to do it one way or another. I'll explain what I mean by that. We'll do it next. Stillman & Company, 615-737-1025. 1025, 1063 The Game. generally speaking, what do we expect PSL prices to be in this new stadium?
Way too early. We literally haven't done the research yet. The reality is, you just hit on it. Our current building is basic by NFL standards. It's got a lower bowl and upper bowl, clubs and suites. Those are the 4 seating products. This new building will be a paradigm shift. We go from 4 experiences to 15, 20 different experiences, and it's on a range where some of them will be premium because we have fans and customers who want a premium experience. And so PSL will be expensive for a premium experience compared to the other end of the spectrum, where we are going to try to have entry points that are similar to Nissan Stadium prices for PSLs. We have not figured that out yet, but that's the objective.
There you go. That's Titans President and CEO Berg Nihill on our show last year when, again, I asked him, I said, so what are PSL prices in the new stadium going to be? And that was a very long and thoughtful answer. But again, Berg was telling you, we haven't even done the research yet. We don't know. We're not sure. Ian, you think that they hadn't done the research yet?
They probably did some research.
Of course they did research, but they didn't want to say. And again, I don't know this for a fact, but I did take their little survey when they were asking if people would be interested in paying certain PSL prices. I think there's going to be some real sticker shock when it comes to the new stadium and the PSLs and everything else. Well, the Titans are on the hook for $850 million of the new stadium, a bunch of which is coming from the NFL, but not all of it. But they also built in PSL sales as a part of it. So they figured, hey, we're going to sell a bunch of PSLs, and that will cover our commitment to the stadium. If they don't sell those PSLs, then they have to pay for the money out of their pocket. Which takes me to reality. A lot of people don't blame Mike Vrabel and Rand Carthon for how terrible the offensive line's been or just really how awful their free agency haul was. DeAndre Hopkins has been good, but they've kind of lucked into that. Outside of that, Andre Dillard was not. Azeez Al-Shaair is probably a backup in the NFL. Aaron Brewer sucks. Daniel Brunskill, just like Azeez, probably more of a backup. Sean Murphy-Bunting has lost you as many games as he's probably won you. So there really wasn't anything special that the Titans did in free agency. In fact, outside of DeAndre Hopkins, I think the Titans' second best free agent addition is Chris Moore. And he barely even gets the football. But that's how, again, bad I thought they did in free agency. Now, I was the one that reported to you that at the Combine, word on the street was the Titans were telling people they didn't have any money. I told you guys that Mike McGlinchey, the top right tackle on the market, who ended up going to the Broncos, who, by the way, fixed their offensive line this year, and they have a much better offensive line than you do, that Mike McGlinchey wanted to play here, wanted to be a Titan, and they had no interest. Well, is that because the Titans thought, oh, no, we'll do better. You'll see. We'll go get Chris Hubbard, PT. Or was it because they didn't have any money to spend? Now, some of you people out there believe in the salary cap. Most of you are probably smart enough to know that if you want players, you can get them. It just costs money. So don't give me the cap, because the cap doesn't matter. It doesn't matter to Baltimore. It doesn't matter to Cleveland. It doesn't matter to the teams that don't care about it. It doesn't matter to them. So again, this offseason, I hear about all the money the Titans are going to have in cap space. Well, that doesn't really mean anything. The question is, how much money will they have to go out in free agency and overpay, which is what you have to do to get a starting level NFL player. How much money will they have to go out and get real starters? Because if they don't give them any money and the Titans are nickel and diming it Walmart style, the way that they did last year, you're probably not going to get any better. And if you don't get any better, all of a sudden you get a lot closer to that new stadium. And that's when the bill comes. The Raiders sold $550 million in PSL sales. But that is a team in a new market. Plus the Raider brand, I mean, that's a serious brand. Again, going into a new market. The Titans are going across the parking lot. There's a lot of people that if this team stinks, they're not going to want to cough up the big bucks in order to buy PSLs. And I've seen what fan apathy around here looks like when it comes to the Titans. When I first came back on the radio, there was so much fan apathy. They would play random teams that weren't even the brand name teams, right? That weren't the Cowboys, weren't the Steelers, weren't the Packers, weren't Brady and the Patriots. They'd play the Miami Dolphins, for instance. And I was just shocked at how much aqua was in the stadium. They'd play the Colts, and I was shocked how much Indy blue was in the stadium. I'm like, Indy doesn't have a lot of fans. You know, it's one thing if it's a traditional great team, or it's another thing if it's a team that's red hot that season. But in 2015, the Miami Dolphins were not that. So, I mean, again, when it comes to ownership, they are going to have to pay real money this offseason. Not monopoly cap dollars, but real money, or else they may not be in the position they want to be when they start asking people for $15,000 to $75,000 or whatever it may be for PSLs on a lousy team. So that's why we've got to decide, and they've got to decide, whether or not it is John Robinson's fault that they lost to the Texans on Sunday. Whether or not it is John Robinson's fault that they couldn't play special teams against New Orleans and Baltimore and Indianapolis. They've got to question themselves about, did our collaboration with our handpicked guys get it wrong with the 11th overall pick with a guard that gave up 2 sacks and can't run block? They've got to sit there and say, can our head coach find the right coaches to develop our young quarterback into a franchise guy so that we find ourselves in the same position the Buffalo Bills are in right now, which is regardless of what happens, when the Bills move into their new stadium, they've got a quarterback. If you want to watch Josh Allen play, and Josh Allen is good enough that any year you've got a chance for the Super Bowl, you have to buy PSLs to see Josh Allen. If you own this team, you have to ask yourself, do I have what is necessary in order to make that a reality over the next couple of seasons? Because if not, when we start knocking on doors and saying, hey, these really premium seating options we have, we'd like $75,000 a crack, you're going to get a lot of people that are going to shut the door in your face. And then all of a sudden, that $850 million that you're kicking in, and the league's giving you some of it, or at least you're taking out debt from the league on the stadium. And I'm sure they've got money saved up for the stadium. But again, I want to say that they assume somewhere around 150, 200 million, something. Somebody who would know told me yesterday that they are committed to hundreds of millions of dollars in PSL sales. Well, if you don't get them because you can't get your team right, whether or not it's you're too cheap and won't go out in free agency to get the players, whether it's you wouldn't pay A.J. Brown the contract, which I don't know I don't believe that, but I guess I wouldn't be shocked by it. You're going to end up paying a bigger bill when that stadium comes due. And the Titans are on the hook for cost overruns. So they're right now committed for $850 million. But if building expenses go up, or if it ends up costing more money than they originally thought, or they have construction setbacks, they're the ones that are paying for it. So that $850 is actually going to be even more money. So you're going to need people to buy PSLs in order to make that new stadium, at least at the beginning, worth your while. And that's where all these decisions have to come into play. This is a massive, massive decision. This can't be, well, I like Vrabel, so let's just give him another chance just to see if he can turn it around next year. Because if he doesn't, now you're 1 year closer to your new stadium, and you're in year 2 of Levis, so now you're going to have to start thinking about a decision there. And then if you draft a guy, again, like it's just a perpetual cycle. And it's one that, hey, you want to get to the answers now. The difference between me and I think a lot of other people out there is I've made up my mind on the commission. on Vrabel and Carthon. It's not going to work. And so if they don't fire these guys, in my opinion, if they don't fire these guys and they bring them back for next year, what's going to happen is this time next year we'll be having the exact same discussions with either the idea that they will be fired or they will have already been fired in the middle of the year. Because I don't believe in their vision, and I don't believe in the results that they've showed us this season. It's been that bad. I think they're too arrogant, both of them. But I don't know if Titans ownership knows that. I don't know if they realize that. And I don't know if they look at that stadium and those PSLs and they say, well, we like Mike, but it's a business. 615-737-1025 is the phone number, 615-737-1025 if you want to weigh in on the program. And there is one other ownership thought I have, one other question as far as ownership is concerned for the Titans that, again, none of us know the answer to. We'll do that next. Hiller Plumbing, Heating, Cooling, and Electrical. That's right. I love Hiller. Hiller is fabulous. They take great care of my home, and I promise they can do you the exact same. Their Cash for the Holidays promotion is back. So they're giving away cash for the holidays with select purchases. Hiller wants to make sure every child experiences the joy of Christmas this year, so they're donating $50 in Toys for Tots with every tankless water heater purchase. And giving away a $250 Visa gift card with each unit. Get a $500 Visa gift card when you buy select new HVAC systems, or get a $500 Visa gift card with the purchase of any new whole home generator. These purchases all have great financing options with low monthly payments. Again, I use Hiller at my home, and I love them for that reason. These deals are only available until the end of the year, so schedule today at happyhiller.com. That's Hiller Plumbing, Heating, Cooling, and Electrical, proud supporters of the Preds, the Vols, and Vandy. Hiller, call the Happy Face Truck today.
As you peruse this roster and you see kind of where things stand right now, do you feel like this team is maybe just a few fixes away from being a contender again, or do you feel like that there's major changes that?
No, this is a competitive team. This is a competitive team, and we can win football games. But at the end of the year, you evaluate your roster every year, and you're always looking for ways to improve that. And so that's what we're going to do here. Although I feel the team is competitive and we're good, the objective is not be good. The objective is to be great. And so we're going to continue to work to build a great roster, and that's going to be every year, so you can always take it to a new height. So that's going to be our approach.
Financial constraints that you have and 6 picks enough?
Sure. I'm never going to say that it's not enough. I don't know any different. We're all at the same point.
There you go. The commission last year telling us, no. We're going to compete in 2023. And they have not. They have not competed. Losing 1-score games and bragging about it is embarrassing. You are not competing. It is December 19th and you are out of the playoffs. That is not competing. And Ian, what did the GM always say the goal every season was?
Win the division, make the playoffs.
Compete for the playoffs. And so the idea that they're going to sit there and say, because a lot of people are doing this where it's like, well, this was a rebuilding year. That's not what they said at the beginning of the year. I could be wrong, but you just heard Vrabel saying, I'm not going to say it's not enough. We've got to get going, and we're going to figure it out. And Rand Carthon, our plan is to compete. That's what they said. But I do wonder what they told the owner. And again, these are things that we'll never know, right? We'll never know if when Rand Carthon sat down with Titans ownership, he said, look, guys, this team sucks. And it's going to take a while because there are so many problems with this house that the renovation isn't going to take one season. Or if he sat down and said, look, this team had a terrible offensive line this past year. This team got nothing out of its passing game. This team was one iffy ref's fumble call away from winning the division. This team went on the road on Sunday Night Football to compete with Kansas City with Malik at quarterback. Let me come in, let me bring in some players, and we'll be right back there and better. And I don't know what he said. I know what he said to you. I know what he said to the media. I know what he said publicly. But I don't know what he said to ownership when it comes to Vrabel. I don't know what he said. I don't know if he went to the owner and said, guys, we are going to take it on the chin this year. But I think there's some truth in that Vrabel cut where he's like, I don't know any different. I think Vrabel's the kind of guy, I go in every game thinking I'm going to win. So I highly doubt he probably went to the owner and said, yeah, we got no shot this year. Expect a 6-win season. And it's going to be ugly out there, but you know what? Better days will come. We just need to remember that. In fact, I don't really think anybody does that in the NFL. Like, I just don't think that that's the mentality of that league. Where it's like, hey, give me time, give me time, give me time. Nobody gets time. Ken Wisenhunt got fired in the middle of his second season. Nobody gets time in the NFL. So, one of two things happened. Either the Titans lied to you with all of the things that we just played and the things that they said going into the season, or the Titans are disappointed with how terrible they've played this year. My guess is it's the latter. Now, I keep going back to the offensive line because the offensive line was the number one concern of the Titans last year. Going into the offseason, Vrabel said it ad nauseum that they have to find new offensive linemen and protect the quarterback. And they've got both quarterbacks hurt this year. So I know everybody wants to say, what did you expect them to fix everything in 1 year? Yeah, I expected them to not give up as many sacks as they gave up last year, and they've given up more. But that's what I expected. What did the owner expect? I don't know. Phone lines driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, 615-737-1025. If you want to weigh in, one texter says Vrabel doesn't know any better. He is not that smart. How can he think that his offensive style can win a Super Bowl when it hasn't won a Super Bowl in 30 years? His offensive style won a Super Bowl in 2018. Trying to think if there's any other kind of Earhart-Perkins system that they run that's won one since then. But they won one in 2018 running this offense. The difference was Tom Brady played quarterback. That was the difference. But it's not the style and the system. You guys just don't like running the ball unless Derrick Henry is running the ball for 60 yards a carry. You guys just don't like it. You guys bitched about that was fair, about Malarkey and running the football. And I'm like, dude, you're winning games running the ball with DeMarco Murray. Well, we need to unleash Mariota. We've got the Lamborghini locked up in the garage. Okay. How'd that work out? Yeah. It's not the style of play that's the problem. It is, A, the players, some of which they brought in, and it is B, the quality of coaches that are coaching them, specifically on the offensive line. And those things go hand in hand. You know, I saw Sam Phelan wrote an article at A to Z Sports, and I didn't read it, but I talked to Sam enough to have a pretty good idea of what was in it. And the headline was something like, coaching is not the problem of the Titans. And it had a picture of Vrabel and Tim Kelly. So I'm going to guess his argument is that Vrabel and Tim Kelly are not the problem. Well, yes and no. I mean, I think we think of the offensive line coach as completely independent of the offensive line player evaluation process. And I just know that when the Titans had a good offensive line with Mike Munchak as their offensive line coach, a good offensive line coach, I know that Mike Munchak was very much a part of the offensive line evaluation process. Now, I don't know if they use this guy for evaluating offensive linemen. They say they do. They say they went to the coaches to get tape on what players they wanted. You know, show us some players that you want, or show us traits of players you want. Now, there is some debate as to whether or not that's actually true, but that is what they said. And so I guess the coaches are a part of it. But I know that when you lost offensive linemen in the first era of Titan football and they just replaced, that Mike Munchak was a big part of that. Whether it was Justin Hartwig or Benji Olsen or Zach Pillar or David Stewart or Michael Roos, whoever it might be, they were a part of it. Munchak was the part of it. So I do think coaching matters there. But as far as like the style of scheme that they run, I don't think that's the problem. And I said yesterday, I think it makes total sense as to why they kept running the ball with Derrick Henry on first down, because their best passing comes off of play action, and the only way to get play action to work is for the other team to think you're going to run the ball. And how do you make them think you're going to run the ball? Put Derrick Henry in the game. Texter says, it is completely fair to question if Amy Adams Strunk has the requisite capital to run the franchise. People forget the hundreds of millions of dollars that were doled out to gain the required controlling interest from her sister. Jeffrey Simmons had a $48 million guarantee that was put in escrow immediately. And add this to the $800 million for the stadium, and this is a ton of money coming from a woman who isn't a billionaire. Well, it's not just her. I mean, it also includes Kenneth and Barkley and all the other Adamses, and they are billionaires. So they've got money. But again, they're going to have to pay one way or another. Like, to me, it's as simple as this. In the NFL, you get what you pay for. How did the Houston Texans become a playoff contender overnight? From the joke of the league to a playoff contender. One, they got a good coach, or at least it looks like they've got a good coach. Two, they spent on the offensive line. George Fant and Shaq Mason were not free. They spent. What did they do at wide receiver? They spent draft capital on Tank Dell. They spent money on Noah Brown. They spent money on Robert Woods. And they spent money on Dalton Schultz. They spent. They spent on Jimmy Ward. Hell, they spent this week to claim T.R. Tart. they spent. So, I mean, if they spend now, if the Titans spend now and get better players, chances are they'll have a better team. Cleveland spends a boatload of money on their team. They haven't even had their quarterback this year, and they're in the playoff mix because the rest of their team is so good because that's what they pay for. But if you don't spend now, if you're the Titans, you will be spending later when you decide to roll out your PSL prices, and all of a sudden PSLs that were going to be $75,000 have to be marked down to $55,000 because no one's going to buy them at $75,000. And then you will be paying then. So you're going to pay one way or another. I just think it's cheaper to get a tight end than it is to have to take a premium seating option and lower the PSL from what you had expected it to be. That's just me. 615-737-1025. More your phone, 615-737-1025 here on Stillman & Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. And let me tell all the fine folks out there here on the wonderful Stillman & Company program. To make your silly underdog picks for your chance to win weekly prizes, you can play at theGameNashville.com or the 102.5 The Game app. Silly underdog picks presented by Volunteer Hose and Gasket.
You've never had a game since you become a starter that you didn't get over 10 yards. At least you had 9 today. Hearing that, I see you reacting.
Yeah, it's tough. Definitely tough, man. Yeah, definitely tough. I don't really have no words. Just wasn't good enough, and yeah, tough.
There you go. That was Derrick Henry, and poor Derrick Henry for that performance on Sunday. But I was kind of laughing because apparently there's all these headlines that are coming up about Derrick Henry is thinking about life after the Titans because of a comment saying that, he's recognizing the fact that there are 3 more games left in the season and that there are now no more games after those 3 games and that this is the last year of his contract. And I'm like, is this anything new? Is this a new story? Is this a new, again, the Titans tried to shop Derrick Henry in the offseason. Like, I know they said they didn't, they did. Mike Silver, who, by the way, doesn't like me, and I don't necessarily like him. Mike Silver reported, and is a credible reporter, that the Titans were shopping Derrick Henry. So even though the Titans can say they weren't, they were. Just like they said there was no smoke there with Kevin Byard, and they ended up trading him, and clearly there was a fire that was brewing underneath that. They went through the trade deadline, and people were wondering, is Henry going to be traded? What do they make of that? And so now the season is almost over. It is, as far as competing is concerned, it is absolutely over. Of course, Derrick Henry knows his contract's up over the next 3 games. And yet, TD wrote a story about it, and all TD did was write about what Derrick said, and Adam Schefter posted it, and then it all of a sudden became like, oh my God, look at this story. And I'm like, that's nothing new. We talked about it last week, about the contract I think they should give Derrick Henry one way or another. One texter says, how sad is it for Derrick Henry that the Titans have gotten cheaper and worse on the offensive line the past 2 seasons? Like, how could Mike Vrabel do that to Derrick Henry at the end? So here's my thing about the last 2 years in the offensive line. I think 2 years ago I really think 3 years ago was where the incompetence began. But at least they had options, right? In 2021, they had Taylor Lewan at left tackle. They had Roger Saffold at left guard, Ben Jones at center, Nate Davis at right guard. And then they had signed Kendall Lamb to compete with Ty Sambrailo and drafted Dylan Radunz to compete for the right tackle job. Now, they got lucky that with all those guys stinking, or in the case of Sambrailo, he retired, David Quessenberry, who had done a good job playing left tackle for them the year before when Lewan tore his ACL, he was able to play right tackle and do it well enough for a practice squad replacement level player. Where they really got stupid, and this is John Robinson's fault, but where they really got stupid was after the 21 season. They released Saffold, and they didn't replace him. They let Quessenberry, who was a restricted free agent, go into free agency without giving him a $2 million right of first refusal tender, which I don't think anybody would have matched, and you would have been paying David Quessenberry $2 million to be your swing tackle. If it didn't work out with Radunz, he'd be your starting tackle. But you'd be paying him $2 million nonetheless. Instead, before the season, you had to trade for Dennis Daly. That's where you got stupid. Then, and because you didn't replace Saffold, you put Aaron Brewer in there thinking you could squeak by with Brewer as your 5th offensive lineman, which you could. The problem was Lewan tore his ACL, and now Daly has to play, and Ben Jones kept going in and out of the lineup, and so it was a disaster. This year was coming a mile away. They took a massive risk on Andre Dillard. They waited until the draft, and they drafted a guard. And I don't know who'd be playing guard for this team if they didn't draft Skoronski, but they drafted a guard. They paid the 270-pound center $4.3 million, which makes no sense, when they could have just paid him $2 million. But again, 270 pounds is too much for, that's not a starting center in the NFL. Brewer is not a starter. They paid Brunskill backup money to be a starter, which again, kind of like Brewer last year or Quessenberry the year before, he can be the 5th offensive lineman if he has to be. The problem is he wasn't, and then they brought Nicholas Petit-Frere back, who wasn't very good as a rookie. Now, I still thought the offensive line was going to be better, because I didn't think it could be any worse than it was with Dennis Daly in that group. It has, in fact, been worse. But this you could see coming a mile away. This was brutal. Jeff from Hendersonville says the Texans have had offensive line injuries all year and haven't missed a beat. They must have a good offensive line coach. It is funny. Kaharski's all mad at me right now, texting me, because obviously he, I think, listens to the show kind of religiously. And Paul's texting me about, if you think that Howdeling has the same level of input as Mike Munchak, then you're crazy. Ah! And I'm like, well, then if he doesn't have the input in order to help evaluate offensive linemen, which, by the way, the general manager, albeit a general manager that doesn't always tell the truth, the general manager has said that he went to the coaches for help on input on players. But if he doesn't have any input as to who's on the offensive line, then he's probably not a good enough offensive line coach. I mean, I would assume that if they had a good offensive line coach, my guess is they would include the offensive line coach in on the evaluation. I mean, what does the offensive line coach do in April then if he's not? Did he not go look at Peter Skoronski before they drafted him? I mean, that doesn't make any sense. I know this. I know the Titans had an offensive line that was an absolute train wreck under Ken Wisenhunt. Mike Mularkey got the full-time head coaching job, brought in Russ Grimm, a Hall of Famer, to be the offensive line coach, and immediately, combined with the signing of Ben Jones and the drafting of Jack Conklin, the offensive line got good. And yesterday I had somebody call in that tried to defend, when talking about John Robinson and the offensive line, trying to defend Quentin Spain, saying, well, he inherited Quentin Spain. I'm like, exactly. He inherited Quentin Spain, and they were good. That tells you all you need to know about how important a good offensive line coach is. CD says the Texans' loss is more deserving of having a reactionary, I think the word is reactive, and it is a pet peeve of mine, so I'm sorry if I'm acting like a grammar guru over here, but the Texans' loss is more deserving of a reactive firing than the Philly game was last year. That was one game on the schedule the Titans could absolutely not lose. In my opinion, one of the most embarrassing losses, CD says, in franchise history. I mean, I truly believe this, they lost to a junior varsity team. They lost to a junior varsity team on Sunday. I don't know how they reason with that. I don't know how they reckon with that. I don't know if they look at it and say, hey, like I said at the very beginning of the show, I said, if they look at that and say, well, it's John Robinson's fault, then they won't have a reactive firing. If they look at it the way I look at it, which is, how did they give up 7 sacks to a Texans team that didn't even have their best sacker in there? Then I'd be asking some questions. 615-737-1025 is our phone number. By the way, Barry Trotz joins us at 5 o'clock, as he always does. Trevor at 4:30, his breakdown on the Titans and the offensive line, which I am very much looking forward to. 615-737-1025. Coming up next here on the program. There's one thing that I've noticed the media does that I don't hear a lot of football people doing. We'll get to that next. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Vanderbilt men's basketball tonight on 94.9 The Fan. The Commodores take on Western Carolina at Memorial Gym. Tip-off at 6 o'clock. Pregame at 5:30. Coverage is also available on the 94.9 The Fan app and at 949thefan.com. Also, tune in to 93.3 Classic Hits tonight for MTSU, as the Blue Raiders have a road matchup against St. Mary's with pregame beginning at 8:30. Tip-off is at 8 o'clock. And coverage is also available on the 93.3 Classic app and at 93.3classichits.com. Stillman and Company, 1025, 1063, The Game, streaming live on Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook live from the Hiller Plumbing, Heating, Cooling, and Electrical Studios. So I know the media is just banging us over the head, whether it's the national media, the local media, just banging us over the head about the idea that Mike Vrabel is infallible, that Mike Vrabel is a great coach, that Mike Vrabel is excellent, and that we in little old Nashville, Tennessee, are lucky to have Mike Vrabel. Now, I used to think that Vrabel was an incredible coach the year that he had 91 players and they ended up winning the division and whatnot. But since then, Mike Vrabel has demonstrated a lack of understanding when it comes to managing the coaching staff. And it seems like all those wins with all those 91 players and those bad rosters that he always gets credit for just happen to always have to have A.J. Brown on them. It's like as soon as A.J. Brown left, the Titans stopped winning games with bad rosters. They still had Tannehill. They still had Henry. They had a bad offensive line last year. They still had bad players. I mean, they have bad players now. But if he's such a great coach because he wins with bad players, what does it tell us that he doesn't win with bad players anymore? Maybe A.J. Brown's not a bad player. Maybe he was pretty important. So I've moved off how I felt about Vrabel 3 years ago, and I've done that because we have new data. We have new evidence. Which takes me back to the media. There are people in the local media that, will just die on the Mike Vrabel hill. I don't get it. I had somebody tell me yesterday that it is not Vrabel's job to motivate the players. I was taken aback by that. Then there's the national media. Diana is reporting on the steak dinners that Mike Vrabel's enjoying with Stretch. Diana's telling everybody that the Titans aren't going to trade him. They're not going to fire him. They're not going to nothing. And she might be right. I don't know. Then there's Colin Cowherd who says we're lucky to have Vrabel. There's Rich Eisen and Mike Florio that say the question is whether or not Vrabel wants to come back. As if Vrabel didn't sign a contract that means that if the Titans want him to be the coach here, he has to be the coach here. But those aren't what we call football people. When I first started doing the Jared and the GM show, he used to always make a big differentiate, or he used to differentiate significantly the difference between the non-football people and the football people. That's why we like having guests on like Trevor. Guy played in the NFL, former first-round draft choice, good college player. Again, he knows what he's talking about, football guy. And I do wonder what the football guys think of Mike Vrabel. I know what the media thinks. The media thinks that Vrabel is infallible. They think that Vrabel is just an expert. And look, Todd Downing, they don't hold that against him. Craig Aukerman, they don't hold that against him. Offensive line coach, they don't hold that against him. We do, because we know that's an important part of being a head coach, but they don't. Rich Eisen doesn't know that. He doesn't care about the Titans offensive line coach. So one of the best things I think they do at paulkaharski.com is former Titans scout and executive Blake Bedingfield writes weekly columns or bi-weekly or whenever, before games, after games. And I always look forward to reading what Blake has to write. Blake worked for the Titans for almost 20 years in the front office. And Blake wrote something about Mike Vrabel and his breakdown of the Texans game that, again, takes me back to what football people might actually think. Blake writes, quote, "With the release of T.R. Tart, it makes me wonder about head coach Mike Vrabel's philosophy on players. Tart, Isaiah Wilson, David Long, Monty Rice, A.J. Brown, Nate Davis, and eventually Christian Fulton and countless others were shipped out of Tennessee because of attitude, reliability, availability, and work ethic. Vrabel," Blake writes, "was an overachiever as a football player who had a very successful NFL career with a tough, physical, smart, disciplined, team-first player intangibles. He describes his type of players that he wants in that same manner. But what he helps bring into the organization is just the opposite. Does he have a Father Flanagan complex that he can fix all people? Or does he just misevaluate the player personality, work ethic, and overall attitude of the player before they get to the organization? The Titans aren't talented enough to allow mistakes in the first round like Isaiah Wilson, or let multiple-year starters like T.R. Tart leave without true replacements on the roster? Who is misevaluating these players, Blake writes? Who determines that they are no longer fits? This offseason is too important, Blake writes, for those questions to continue to go unanswered. Now, John Robinson is certainly on the list when it comes to, say, Isaiah Wilson. But I have it on pretty good authority. I wouldn't say pretty good. I have it on great authority that Mike Vrabel and Arthur Smith wanted Isaiah Wilson. They were part of the evaluation process. So when it comes to these things, like, does Vrabel just think, oh, I can fix them, I can coach them, what happens? And then again, I go back to football people and what football people think of Mike Vrabel. Ian, when Cedric calls into the show constantly, what's he call Vrabel?
Coach Meathead.
And do you think that he means that in like a positive way or an endearing way when he describes Vrabel?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, I don't either. It's very condescending. Basically, he's saying he thinks Vrabel's stupid, which takes me to halftime of the CBS broadcast where, again, football people, Phil Simms, Coach Cowher, who, by the way, coached Vrabel, that crew, Boomer Esiason, this is what they said at halftime on CBS.
Will Levis, I mean, the connection with him and Mike Vrabel, it just seems like they're meant for each other. Okay?
What are you trying to say? They have the same type of personality?
Oh, man.
In what way?
Hold on, pause it right here. So, again, right now, clearly there's an inside joke that we don't know about, right? Because as soon as Phil Simms says it, he were to sit on the desk and say, I'll tell you, I think Will Levis and Mike Vrabel are just, they're meant for each other. Do you think the whole room would have bust out laughing? Continue.
Oh,
In what way? Can you elaborate?
Well, we just, we talk about here, they're meatheads. That's a compliment.
Like we are.
Uh-huh.
Well, you?
Speak for yourself. Okay. All right, man. I'm trying to...
Hey, Phil Simms says, that's a compliment. Really? Is it a compliment when Cedric calls in and calls him Coach Meathead? Is it a compliment? No, it is not. So, again, the CBS crew in New York, what they just let us into, they let us behind the scenes a little bit. They're sitting around the studio in New York, and they're like, look at these two freaking meatheads in Vrabel and Levis. Now, I actually think Levis is pretty smart. But they're like, look at these two freaking meatheads. Ha, 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 ha. So then Phil Simms takes it to air where he talks about how they're meant for each other. And because they know the inside joke, they all start laughing. And then Cowher puts Phil Simms on the spot. Like, yeah, Phil, tell us what you really mean. Ha, 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 ha. So again, I know. Diana Rossini tells me Mike Vrabel has never lost a game. Mike Vrabel has never made a bad decision as coach. The local media, the same people, some of them, that just constantly went to bat for Jeff Fisher, that told us, you watch, you fire Jeff Fisher, he'll have a job tomorrow. And he did get a job tomorrow, and he stunk at that job. Those same people tell me Vrabel's a great coach all the time. But then again, I got a guy who spent 20 years working in the front office who's like, we need to start talking about Vrabel. Again, the line in the Blake Bedingfield article at paulkaharski.com is, and I got the quote right in front of me, it is too important for those questions to continue to go unanswered. And the CBS crew is laughing at halftime because he's a meathead, according to them. So do the football people think Mike Vrabel is as smart as the media people constantly tell us Mike Vrabel is? That he's really that good of a coach? And I do wonder that. 615-737-1025 is our phone number. We'll get to your phones. 615-737-1025. Speaking of T.R. Tart, the T.R. Tart drama got ratcheted up yesterday. And it is not an accident, that the Houston Texans claimed him. We'll get to that next. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game.
Like, what led to Eric Tart getting released, and did he ask for his release at all?
I think we can touch on some of those personnel decisions, at the end of the season. But, we're excited about the guys that are here now and working with them and moving towards them and, finding those guys that we can work with.
Hey, Mike, you cut a 2-year starting defensive tackle that was probably your number one run stuffer for the last couple of years, and a guy who we all know is a pretty good player, and you just magically cut him overnight. Can you talk about that at all? No, I think I'll talk about that later. And by the way, this is the Vrabel trick. What Vrabel does is he says now's not the time to talk about it because we're focused on the Seahawks, because God forbid we lose this game. We're focused on the Seahawks. And then once the season's over and he gets asked about it, he'll say, I don't want to talk about what was in the past. We've moved forward. So yesterday, I'm sure it went right up his keister when the waiver wire came down and the Houston Texans claimed Teair Tart off of waivers from the Titans. And I saw this and I thought, oh my God, the Texans are just going to take their asses and stick them right in your face. And this is exactly why they did this to Teair Tart. Everybody's using everybody in this case, right? What the Texans are doing is they claimed a very talented player. Now, they've already got a great defensive line, whether it's Rankins or Collins or Anderson or, again, you saw them get 7 sacks in the second half. You saw Derrick Henry not even run for 10 yards. You know they've got a good defensive line. And so what they've done is they've added Teair Tart. Now, what happened with Tart was Mike Vrabel went on a PR campaign when they got rid of Teair Tart, not publicly, but privately, went on a PR campaign to trash Teair Tart. Basically to say that nobody respects Teair Tart and that Teair Tart was lazy and that Teair Tart was playing for a contract and that Teair Tart, basically what the Titans wanted everybody to think. And they may be right in this, I don't know. But what they wanted everybody to think is that Teair Tart was a lazy, fat lump of glue. That's what they wanted everybody to think. Now, I know that in 2021, he was one of the off-season Workers of the Year award winners, but that's a different discussion for a different day. And so the Texans have claimed Teair Tart. The Titans fired Teair Tart last week. Now, they did it Friday late in the day so they wouldn't have to answer questions about it because, again, accountability is not atop their list. But they fired Teair Tart. The Texans, sensing an opportunity to A, embarrass you, and B, make their team better, claim Tart. And here's the way the Texans are viewing it. DeMeco Ryans probably knows that Teair Tart's got talent. Why? Because we all know that Teair Tart has talent. Teair Tart, when he wants to be, is a good football player. The Texans are probably thinking, hey, we shill out just a little bit of money, we bring in Teair Tart, but we can motivate him. And here's why we can motivate him. Because the way the Titans did him, with Vrabel firing him in the middle of the season, sent a message to everybody in the league that Tart going into free agency was a bad guy. The St. Louis Rams did the same thing with Kevin Carter. He was a bad guy. He was lazy. He was no good. By the way, Kevin Carter hasn't played here for 20 years and still does charity in the Nashville area. The reason the Titans went after Kevin Carter is because they had done their homework on Kevin Carter prior to the 95 draft, and they thought there's no way these rumors about Kevin Carter being lazy and a bad guy are true. And they were right. But again, the message for everybody out there that doesn't know Teair Tart was he's lazy. He's selfish. He's a bad teammate. Well, the Houston Texans are giving Teair Tart the opportunity to right the wrong. What they're doing is they're telling Teair Tart, hey, man, if you come here and you play your tush off and you show the league your talent, you will go into free agency with a fresh slate, with people saying, hey, that Teair Tart in that playoff run for the Texans, he actually played really well. And then you will get the contract that we all know Teair Tart wants to go out and get. We know it. Meanwhile, I think the Texans are looking at the opportunity in 2 weeks And I don't know if it matters to the McNair family or not. Probably does a little bit, but it matters to their fans to be able to embarrass the Titans. What they did on Sunday, the way they embarrassed the Titans with the ragtag JV football team they put out there and the 7 sacks that they got while you were wearing the Oiler uniforms, inducting a Houston Oiler great into your Ring of Honor with Earl Campbell in attendance, that is a game ball to the owner kind of game. It's personal. And it's personal for the Houston Texan fans. It's personal in the newspapers. It's personal on the radio. I went on the radio last week, and the host told me it was sick to him, the idea of the Titans wearing the Oilers uniforms. So this is another opportunity for the Texans to put their middle finger right in your face. And guess who you play in 2 weeks? And again, I think this is part of the thinking. I think D'Amico Ryans looks at this as we're going to try to motivate T.R. Tart to be able to get the best out of him. So what are we going to do? We're going to tell him, not only if you play well for us with a clean slate, will you be able to go out and get a contract, but you're going to get to go play the Titans. You saw what we did to them on Sunday. You're going to have the opportunity to be 6 yards in the backfield tackling Derrick Henry. You're going to have the opportunity to go up against 270-pound Aaron Brewer, as you know you can dominate him and lay it on him in 2 weeks. It's a genius move by the Texans. And if it doesn't work out, then they'll just deactivate him and they'll go on about their business. They didn't give up a draft pick. They didn't give up a bunch of money. They didn't do anything. They just claimed him. And now they have him. And don't think this isn't personal. And I'm sure there are questions when it comes to ownership about, wait a minute, why did we fire T.R. Tart? Well, he was lazy and he wasn't working hard and he was worried about the contract and he was, okay, I guess that makes sense. Not if he dominates you in 2 weeks, it won't. So that is not nothing that he got claimed by the Texans. That was, I bet you there was oh boy. Why? I bet there was a why us inside the Titans building. Phone lines are driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com at 615-737-1025. Caleb in Gallatin says, wouldn't you consider the Titans a JV team? This is in reference to me calling the Texans a junior varsity team. I mean, minus DeAndre Hopkins and Derrick Henry, the Titans don't really have anyone. I'll take Levis over Case Keenum any day, but with the offensive line and him being a rookie quarterback, it doesn't surprise me that the Titans lost to a JV Texans team. You went through every position the other day, and the Titans have very few legitimate NFL starters. That comes from Caleb in Gallatin. Here's the difference, though. They chose those guys to be on their team. Like, they chose Jack Gibbons to start at linebacker. This isn't they went out in free agency and they signed 2 guys and they got hurt and there was nobody left and so they had to call him up from the practice squad. No. He was the week 1 starter at inside linebacker. In fact, even Jalen Duncan, who is the definition of a junior varsity player, because what he really needs to be doing right now is playing in the minor leagues. He needs to be playing in one of these USFLs, XFLs, something like that, getting all the reps of playing left tackle and then come back to training camp next year. But you chose to play Jalen Duncan at left tackle because the guy that you paid $29 million to, Andre Dillard, is healthy and active, and you could play him if you wanted to. Skoronski's the 11th overall pick. You had your starting, and again, Duncan is your starting left tackle by choice. You had your starting left tackle, your starting left guard, your starting center, your starting right guard, a backup right tackle, your starting quarterback, again by choice. You could have played Tannehill. So your starting quarterback by choice, your starting running back, your second running back, who's basically a starter, your starting receivers, your starting tight end. You had your starters. You were missing basically a defensive tackle in Jeffrey Simmons, a corner in Christian Fulton, and a right tackle in Chris Hubbard. Well, that's just December. Like, guys get hurt and backups have to play. But in this case, The Texans were playing without their starting left guard, without their starting center, without their starting right tackle, without their starting number 1 receiver, without their starting number 2 receiver, without their starting quarterback, and without their best pass rusher, who was the number 3 pick in the draft, and their biggest defensive free agent acquisition, Jimmy Ward, got hurt early in the game. That's the difference between a JV team and the crap you put out on the football field. Texter said, regarding Tart, the Titans weren't willing to pay up next year for free agency, and Tart knew it and was disgruntled, so they let him go. His agent straightened him out, so he looked elsewhere with instructions to play hard. I'm going to guess his agent was probably talking to him the whole time. I highly doubt Drew Rosenhaus doesn't know how this works. Drew Rosenhaus might be an a-hole, but he's not stupid. He knows how this works. And so if Teair Tart was unhappy about the Titans not being willing to pay him next year in free agency, then he should have just played hard and then gone somewhere else and gotten a contract. And I have a very hard time thinking that Rosenhaus didn't tell him that. We'll see how he does for the Texans. We'll see how he does. Texter says, do you remember how Kevin Byard and a few of the other defensive players complained about the organization communication in 2020 after Dean Pease left? Remember who the de facto GM was that year? It was Shane Bowen. Correct. Now Shane Bowen is DC with Jim Schwartz gone, and the defensive players are wanting out. Shane Bowen is awful. I think that Vrabel does get talked in to coaching staff changes, that he'll do what Mike Mularkey just wouldn't do, like where, again, Mularkey wouldn't fire Rubisky or some of the other coaches, but I think there's more to that than just that. That's the narrative. I don't think it's necessarily 100% true, but again, I think that Vrabel makes staff changes. Like when they tell him, I don't think Vrabel wanted to fire Todd Downing. I think Vrabel thought Todd Downing did a good job, but Vrabel did. And he fired Keith Carter, and he fired the secondary coach. It's almost like it was reactive, right? Ownership says, our line stinks, fire the line coach. Okay. So I think at the end of the year, knowing the way that, again, people demand things, I think Houdeling's out. Ackerman's already out. I believe Tom Quinn will be made the full-time special teams coach if I had to take a guess. Houdeling's out, the offensive line coach. And I think Bowen will be out as well. And I wonder about Tim Kelly. I wouldn't fire Tim Kelly if I'm going to keep Mike Vrabel, which I wouldn't do. I wouldn't fire Tim Kelly if Vrabel's still the head coach. But I could see them listening to a lot of you all saying, why are we running the ball? And make Vrabel fire him. Which I just have, again, I think, if you're going to make the head coach fire the offensive coordinator every year, then doesn't it become apparent that the offensive coordinator, the head coach doesn't really know how to hire an offensive coordinator? And if the head coach doesn't know how to hire an offensive coordinator, isn't that kind of your real problem there? 615-737-1025 is our phone number, 615-737-1025. There is a decision that has to be made for the Titans in which I truly hope they make the decision that is probably not in the best interest of the franchise. We'll get to that next. Stillman and Company, and I think it's the decision Vrabel's going to make. Stillman and Company at 615-737-1025. If you want to weigh in tomorrow between 9 and 11, Chase and Big Joe will be giving away tickets to see Kenny Chesney and Zach Brown Band at Nissan Stadium on Saturday, August 3rd. Each weekday winner will also qualify to win a $250 Electronic Express gift card. That's tomorrow morning between 9 and 11 with Chase and Big Joe.
If Will can't go, is it simply Ryan, or do you have to consider Malik?
I don't think, Ryan would, we'll see where we're at based on Will's health, and we'll keep you updated.
How about that from Vrabel, where it's like, so if Will can't go, and again, he sprained his ankle, and I know Levis is tough, but chances are, like, if he's going to look like Trevor Lawrence when he came back off the ankle, then I'd say at least sit him out for a game. I'm not one of these people that just says, shut it down with Levis. If Levis can go, then I want Levis to go, because there's only 17 of these a year, and he will not take a live snap until maybe September of next year. So I want to get Will Levis as much playing time as I can if he's healthy enough to play. But I do think it is a fascinating conundrum, which is who's going to be the starting quarterback for the Titans if Will Levis can't play. And it would seem, again, I'm not a doctor, but I figure that he sprained his ankle once they showed him jogging around, or they said he was jogging around the bench before overtime was over the other day. It would seem to me that with a sprained ankle, he's probably not going to be 100% the rest of the season, or certainly I would doubt that he's ready to go on Sunday. So I think it would be the right decision for the franchise to play Malik Willis. But I don't want them to do that. And I think there's a couple things at play here. First of all, with Malik Willis, there's two reasons to play him. One, there is, in case you think there's any chance he can be your backup next season, which I don't think there is, but stranger things have happened. And teams carry 3 quarterbacks now because of the 3-quarterback rule. If there is any chance that Malik can be your backup, you, I assume, would want to get him as much game experience as possible. Or at least let this confirm it for you that he can't even be your 3rd quarterback and move on. I think the other reason is because you'll probably lose and get a better draft choice. And while, again, I'm not into tanking, and I don't think the Titans should be into tanking, and again, I do understand the idea of the value of the 4th pick or the 5th pick and how much more valuable that is than, say, the 12th pick. That being said, you drafted Peter Skoronski. He might not be any good. The Ravens, picking well after you, drafted Zay Flowers, and he is good. So there are still good players to be had, even if you don't have a great first-round pick. But I don't want to see Malik Willis play. And that's why if I was running the team, I wouldn't play Malik Willis. I'd play Tannehill. I just don't want to watch Malik. I just know that if they put Malik out there, they're going to lose to Seattle. And then after they lose to Seattle, they're going to go on the road to Houston, and they're going to get beat. And then they're going to play Jacksonville at home with nobody in the stands, and they're going to lose. And quite frankly, I don't want to waste my time watching Malik Willis play quarterback. I've seen him stink enough in the preseason, in the Ravens game, last year. I've seen enough. I don't need to see any more. Now there's the person who actually makes that decision, Vrabel. And again, when Vrabel was asked about if Will can't go, is Ryan the guy, his answer was, can we get that cut again, Ian? That this is Mike Vrabel?
I don't think, Ryan would, we'll see where we're at based on Will's health, and we'll keep you updated.
We'll see. So the reason that I want to see Tannehill as opposed to why Vrabel I think Vrabel's going to play Tannehill. Even though, again, I do think it's probably in the best interest of the team to play Willis, and I am for playing Tannehill because I don't want to watch Malik play quarterback. I think he's going to play Tannehill, and I'm going to tell you exactly why I think he's going to play Tannehill. Because if they play Malik, they have no chance to win. And I know that, people in the media will tell you, Vrabel is absolutely not on the hot seat. First of all, being on the hot seat means that people are talking about your job status, that there's a chance that you could be fired, and there absolutely is a chance that Mike Vrabel could be fired, or there absolutely is a chance that the conversation will continue about Mike Vrabel's job status, and that's not going to change anytime soon. And if you put Malik Willis out there at quarterback, you will go 0-3, and you will lose 2 division games, and there is a chance that you lose 40-0 with C.J. Stroud playing for the Texans in 2 weeks. How will your owner feel then? So that's the reason why I think he's going to play Tannehill. I think the second reason, the really only viable football reason that I think that they should play Tannehill over Willis is because as far as experience and development is concerned, how important to the long-term future of the Tennessee Titans is the experience and development for Malik Willis? I'd argue not very important. Now, how important is the development and experience of Chigakonkwo, Traylon Burks, Tajay Spears, and anybody else who would count as a young guy that we want to see develop? Even guys like Skoronski and Duncan, and again, I don't think Duncan's ever going to start in the NFL, but, experience, he might one day. Like, that's important. That playing time is valuable. Well, how is Chigakonkwo supposed to get any better if they're playing Malik Willis at quarterback? And I just don't think he can. Same with Tajay Spears. If you put Malik at quarterback in an NFL game against teams that are competing for the playoffs, and I believe, Ian, Seattle is still competing for the playoffs in the NFC after they won last night?
That is correct.
So 3 teams you're playing are all competing for the playoffs. They're going to be playing their hardest. If you put Malik out there, it's going to be 3 and out, 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 interception, 3 and out, 3 and out, 1 first down, 3 and out, and then you're going to have a 2-minute drive where Malik throws the ball away on 4th down or jumps back in bounds and lets the clock run out. How many reps is that for Burks and Spears and Okonkwo and these other young guys that are probably going to be on the team next year? So that's the football argument for Tannehill over Willis. That's not my argument. My argument is I just don't want to watch Malik Willis play quarterback. I just think he sucks. And I think that if he does, they're going to get crushed in all 3 games, and I'm just not interested in that. So I'm being completely transparent when I'm telling you why I wouldn't play Malik Willis. I'm also being transparent when I tell you why I think Mike Vrabel's reasoning for playing Tannehill will be different to mine. And I'm telling you the real reason that you could argue it's a good idea to play Tannehill, even though that is not my number one reason for playing Tannehill. The other thing, and it's not going to be easy, and it's not going to be easy to have this happen, but wouldn't it be really nice if the Titans can get to that Jacksonville game and let's say Levis is out or something like that, and if nothing else, have Henry and Tannehill come off the field at the same time? For whatever fans show up for that Jacksonville game, because while it hasn't all been rosy with Tannehill at quarterback, it's been more good than bad. It is truly the end of the chapter of the second era of Titans football, the second good era of Titans football. Who knows where they go from here? But wouldn't it be nice, to do that? And I heard Derek talking about yesterday about how Ryan Tannehill probably wouldn't even want to play in these games. And I'm like, how many more games are left in Tannehill's career? Right? He's 35 years old. He's made $200 million. How many more games does he have? He's got young children. How many more opportunities would they have to go out and watch him play? So I think if Tannehill were called upon, he'd go out and play. I think he'd want to play. And so I think Tannehill, if Levis can't go, I think Tannehill should be the quarterback. And again, my number one reason for that is I just don't want to watch Malik play. 615-737-1025. We'll get to your phone, 615-737-1025. Plus, something that maybe necessarily doesn't have to do with anything here, but it might. And it might have something to do with next year here. We'll do that next. Stillman and Company right here on 102.5 and 106.3 The Game.
You have a message for the fans, pretty despondent at this point in time after.
Sure. I mean, I understand. I mean, that's a responsibility. That's my job, right? And that's never lost on me. When you take these jobs, I mean, you're fortunate as hell. You know, you get those. It's really lucky to get to do what you love to do, and you care deeply about, you know, the organization. It's not just about you. It's about the players. It's about everybody that works here, and it is about the fans, because otherwise you wouldn't have this job. And certainly we're not where we want to be, and we've lost some close games, but it's not over, and we will die trying to make sure we get this right and just go win this game, and then let's see what happens. But I understand. I mean, that is a responsibility, and it's a burden you carry, and you're not a victim. I mean, you don't ever want to lose that passion and love that you get to go do this job, because it is a privilege. And thankfully, we still have some life. But I understand the frustration. We want to win, and that's your job, is to win.
There you go. That was Arthur Smith in Atlanta. They lost to the freaking Carolina Panthers the other day. They're playing the Colts this week, and Taylor Heineke is going to be starting at quarterback. And Arthur is being asked about his job, and there's a sense that, you know, Arthur Blank, the owner in Atlanta, is pretty loyal and everything. And I have no idea what the pulse on Arthur Smith is. But let me just say this. I am so incredibly and undeniably shocked that Arthur Smith has stunk this bad in Atlanta. This is why I always tell people, when like the hiring cycles go down, especially in college football, but really any kind of football, where it's like, that's a home run hire. And I'm like, dude, there is no way to know. When it comes to Arthur Smith, I think Arthur Smith is smart. I think Arthur Smith knows what he's doing, at least on the offensive side of the ball. I think Arthur Smith is a genius. I think Arthur Smith is a good man. I think Arthur Smith is a good leader. I think he's the kind of guy who, at least the way that I feel about Arthur Smith, is that Arthur is kind of like Barry Trotz, from the standpoint that with Barry Trotz, he's such a straight shooter that I know that, like, there's no ulterior motive there. There's no angle. And it's a guy, like, I respect that with Barry and with Arthur and with guys like that. And he's been terrible. And, I mean, he has failed at the quarterback position. In fact, when it comes to Desmond Ridder, they decided they were going to start him as their quarterback, and they had the 7th pick, and they brought in Will Levis, and I thought to myself, if they don't go quarterback here, and they did not go quarterback, and they did not sign a quarterback, like, I thought they'd at least sign like a Sam Darnold to be the backup, a guy who really could be a starter. And they didn't. They decided they were rolling with Ridder, and they just brought in a backup to be the backup. And I figured, well, Ridder must be good, because if Arthur thinks Ridder's good, then I believe Arthur knows what he's doing, so he must be. And Ridder is horrible. Like that game they played here, and everybody talks about, well, the defense played well in the Atlanta game. No, they did not. Desmond Ridder played terribly in the first half. They made the switch to Heineke, and the Titans barely got a stop in the second half. The only reason the Falcons lost the game is because on 4th down, Van Jefferson dropped the ball that hit him in the hands. In The Athletic, Jeff Schultz is a longtime Atlanta columnist, writes, Ridder's failures, which may have led Smith to going back to Heineke as the starter, don't and shouldn't absolve Smith. He and general manager Terry Fontenot drafted Ridder 2 years ago. They felt they saw enough in practices and in 4 starts at the end of last season to turn the offense over to him. They didn't draft another quarterback, and they only signed Heineke as a safety net. The problem, Schultz writes, has been the offense. The problem has been the quarterback and the head coach who was hired for his offensive acumen. Ridder won't be the team's starting quarterback next season, and the question is whether Smith will be given another chance. And I'm like, man, I can't believe Arthur Smith's been that bad. Now, here's where this comes into play for the Titans. Number one is this. I don't think the Titans are going to fire Tim Kelly. I could see ownership feeling the way the fans do with all those runs on first down, which I don't have as much of a problem with as a lot of you guys did. I could see ownership being mad about it and forcing Vrabel to make another change. And if Arthur's out there, that would be the hire that the owners would probably agree with, that the fans would agree with, and that we know can work with Vrabel, right? Would be bringing Arthur Smith back. And if Arthur gets fired, there may not be another head coaching job out there for Arthur since, again, Arthur is not a household name. So that's the first thing. The second thing is this. I have always thought about how much I would like Arthur to be my head coach. I mean, in all seriousness. Like, I've thought, man, Arthur Smith, boy, the Titans are okay with Vrabel, and this is how I was feeling when Arthur Smith left. But, man, the Falcons are getting a coach. Like, he's going to be a great head coach, and he's a good guy, and he takes accountability, and he's all these things. But now, I don't necessarily know if I do feel that way about Arthur, right? Like I've told you, I'm moving on from Vrabel. If I own the team, I'm moving on from Vrabel at the end of the year, period. And Arthur would have certainly been on my list of guys that I would have been interested in, but it's been so bad, and he screwed up the quarterback situation so poorly in Atlanta that I'm kind of, like, I don't know if I could hire Arthur Smith. And I am just shocked. And some people are texting into the text line, and they're like, some people are just better coordinators than they are head coaches. And that's true. But I didn't think Arthur was that kind of guy. I mean, I thought Arthur was a, soil of the earth kind of guy. Like, I thought Arthur was a kind of a great leader and everything else. Texture says, Arthur Smith is a bum. He had A.J. Brown and Derrick Henry and looked really good, but when you have no talent, then what? That's why the Lions coach is a great coach. He worked with nothing and built a competitive team, and Arthur Smith can't do that. I don't know, man.
Well, his criticism is he's not getting his good players the ball enough.
Right. I mean, I thought when they drafted Bijan Robinson with the 7th overall pick, I was like, this is going to be Barry Sanders.
They're all mad that Drake London, Kyle Pitts, and Bijan Robinson don't get the ball.
I mean, I really thought, like, when they drafted him with the 7th overall pick, I was like, he's going to be Barry Sanders. Like, Bijan Robinson is going to be a first-team All-Pro as a rookie. Like, he's going to come in right away and set the league on fire, and they're going to run the offense with Derrick Henry as Bijan Robinson and Drake London as A.J. Brown and Kyle Pitts as Jonnu Smith, and that they are going to light up the friggin' scoreboard.
And they still give the ball to Cordell Patterson.
And Algier, and they throw to Jonnu.
Yep.
And I'm like, what the hell, Arthur? Like, and again, we go back to my criticisms of Skoronski, right? If you're going to draft a guard with the 11th pick, if you're going to draft a running back with the 7th overall pick, he freaking better be Barry Sanders. And instead, to your point, they're giving the ball to Cordell Patterson and Taylor Algier. So I don't know what the deal, why Arthur has failed so poorly. But it is kind of shocking, isn't it? 615-737-1025 is the phone number, 615-737-1025. Somebody texted in and said, if they fire Arthur Smith, does Vrabel bring him back over Tim Kelly? I'm like, if ownership makes him, he probably does. Not sure it would work a second time, but we shall see. Coming up next, speaking of Vrabel and speaking of accountability, I'm going to be accountable and tell you I didn't do a very good job of asking a question at the press conference yesterday. But I do wonder about Vrabel's accountability for the offensive line and what he had to say. We'll get to that next. Stillman & Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game, streaming live on Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook live from the Hiller Plumbing, Heating, Cooling, and Electrical Studios, Bridgestone Arena tonight, Preds and Vancouver, right here on 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Barry Trotz joins us in 1 hour. Trevor with his breakdown in 30 minutes, and of course we will be talking about the offensive line with Trevor, which is where I want to start this segment. The root of the Titans' problems are that the offensive line is horrendous. Now, let me just say this, because I'm about to talk about accountability when it comes to the head coach of the Titans. I asked him yesterday about his accountability, and I don't think I asked a very good question. In fact, I'm still upset with the fact that I don't think I asked the question well enough yesterday or was clear enough yesterday, even though I think he knows exactly what I meant. But first, for some background, there have been 3 opportunities specifically on the season where Vrabel has been asked directly about the offseason issues with the offensive line. Again, Vrabel said after the season was over, got to protect the quarterback, got to protect the quarterback, got to protect the quarterback, got to protect the quarterback. Vrabel got a promotion to at least some sort of executive front office type role in finding the guys who have to protect the quarterback. And their answer was Andre Dillard, drafting Peter Skoronski, giving Aaron Brewer more money, Daniel Brunskill, and ultimately what was originally Chris Hubbard. And they've been terrible from the jump, and they've gotten both quarterbacks hurt. So at 3 different points this year, Vrabel has been asked about the offensive line and the mistakes made in the offseason. Here's what he said.
The offensive line has struggled blocking all season long. It's not a new problem. We experienced that last year. Why wasn't there more done in the offseason to address that position group?
Well, I would disagree that they've struggled. They've struggled on third down, hasn't been our best.
Where do you feel like this offseason maybe you and Rand maybe miscalculated on the offensive line?
Yeah, I think there's been too much said, about that, particular spot. I mean, I think that, Rand and I and Chad and A-Rob and the coaching staff, we'll focus on, personnel and player acquisition when we get there. Right now it's focusing on, getting a meeting that has the corrections and, moving forward here to Jacksonville and, what we have.
Understanding that guys getting hurt is part of it. Is there any sense of organizational guilt for what was assembled to be in front of your 2 quarterbacks, that they've both gotten hurt?
Nobody likes to see any player get hurt, and the responsibility to protect the guy with the ball, whether that's the quarterback, the running back, the receiver, kickers. So we have to do a better job of protecting all of them.
How about the level beyond that in terms of rosters?
We have to do everything that we can to continue to protect the guy with the football.
Okay, so I heard that, and I felt like Mike Vrabel was dodging accountability for what happened this offseason. And so I asked, and again, I don't think I did a very good job of this, but I asked him, is he dodging accountability? Here's what he said.
When you talk about the offensive line and are asked about the offseason, kind of always pivot every time, worried about the next game, or Paul asked yesterday about the offensive line and just talked about protecting as opposed to what happened in the offseason. Is the accountability for the fans about what happened with the offensive line this year that kind of dodging a little bit?
No.
Okay. So again, I didn't do a great job of asking that question. I'll be the first to admit it. But you get the gist, and so does he. He doesn't answer these questions. From a fan standpoint, he's kind of dodging accountability. This is Mike Vrabel, who always gets up there and talks about accountability. This is Mike Vrabel, who always demands that from everybody. This is Mike Vrabel, who at one time looked at John Glennon in a press conference and told him, "You're better than that." And it wasn't even anything bad John Glennon did. I can't even remember what John Glennon did. And Vrabel said, "You're better than that." So he's trying to hold other people accountable, but has he been accountable? Now, my question, in which he said when I asked, been dodging, nope, was for the fans. So, I mean, I think you know what I think when it comes to Vrabel's accountability, but my question is for you, which is, has Mike Vrabel been accountable for this offensive line? When Mike Vrabel refuses to answer questions about how they put this ragtag crap group together, is he really putting his hand up in the air and saying, hey, guys, I screwed this up, and give me another chance next year to try to get it right? Or is he putting his chest out there and saying, I can do no wrong and I did no wrong on the offensive line this year? Again, this is a question for you at 615-737-1025 because you're the fans. You know what I think. The one reason why I thought this team was going to be good this year, and I've gotten pretty much everything right. I went crazy about Aaron Brewer as a starting center. I could not believe that the Titans would draft a guard with the 11th overall pick. I got into it with Vrabel when it came to Craig Aukerman. So I've been right about pretty much everything this year as far as like the things that people want to push back on and say, oh yeah, Vrabel showed you in that press conference about Craig Aukerman. Yeah, well, who got the last laugh after the Colts game? But the one reason why I thought the Titans were going to be better this year and were going to make the playoffs, and honestly, if this had come true, probably would make the playoffs, is I didn't think there was any way the offensive line was going to be worse than it was last year. Last year's offensive line was terrible. The starting left tackle tore his ACL, so they had a backup left tackle the whole season, which was not their choice. The left guard was 270 pounds. The center was in and out of the lineup. The right guard, also in and out of the lineup, unreliable, not a Vrabel guy, kind of like Tier Tart. And the right tackle was a rookie who stunk. And that offensive line was significantly better than the offensive line that he helped put together with Rand Carthon this year. And when asked about why there hasn't been more done, he doesn't answer the question. In fact, he disagreed with Caroline that the offensive line had been bad. And that was after the Ravens game, after they got the first quarterback hurt. He's not stupid. At least I don't think he's that stupid. There's no way he doesn't think the offensive line has an absolutely freaking stunk this year. Then I asked him after the Jacksonville game. I'm like, where was the miscalculation? Because if they're going to get this right this upcoming season, they need to be able to explain. First of all, they need to admit that they screwed up. And then secondly, they need to admit where the problem was. If your problem with why your offensive line was so bad is because John Robinson drafted Isaiah Wilson 3 years ago, then you're never going to get it right. Then you'll just always blame the last guy for all of your problems. You went into the offseason knowing that Isaiah Wilson wasn't going to be on the team. You went into last year's offseason knowing that. So why didn't you go out and get somebody better? Why is the best having to, again, sign Chris Hubbard off the scrap heap? And when it comes to, again, them, the commission, trying to get this right, I mean, Chris Hubbard's been the best offensive lineman they've had this year. And that was a throwaway scrap heap, we'll sign him because we got to sign somebody type decision. Andre Dillard got real money. Aaron Brewer got real money. Daniel Brunskill was signed early in free agency. Their best offensive lineman came off the street just because we got to do something right before training camp. Same with their best receiver. Albeit DeAndre for a little bit more money, but not like you're paying DeAndre a bunch. So that's the question for you guys. Have they been accountable? And I think with problems and addressing problems and fixing problems, the number one thing is to be able to admit the problem. The second thing is to be able to admit where the problem comes from or why the problem happened. That's why in John Robinson's last pre-draft press conference, I asked him multiple times about the 2019 draft. The 2019 draft is an all-timer, right? Simmons, Brown, Davis, Hooker, David Long. Like, just a freaking bomb of a draft. So why 2020, 2021 did it go so off the rails? Was it COVID? Was it change in scouts? Was it, what was it? Somebody explain it. That's why I kept asking. He's like, well, Jared, you really like that 2019 draft. Yeah, because it was good. So I want to know what you did then to be able to get back to it. So when it comes to fixing the offensive line, I can't trust these guys to do it until they explain to me, A, that they think that they screwed up because they did and they take the blame for it, and then B, they explain where they did it and how they plan to get better this upcoming year. And you know what? The question was for the fans. So it's not about what I think in terms of accountability, it's what you think. 615-737-1025. We'll get to your phones. 615-737-1025. Stillman and Company, 1025, 1063 The Game.
We talked about guys and how much you expect out of the defensive line because of the money that you pay those players. Using the 11th pick on Peter, are you disappointed with where his play is right now?
No, I think Peter's been working hard, and again the player evaluation. We're putting a team together, and Peter works. Peter's improved. Not sure what the first part of your question had anything to do with Peter, but we're just okay. We all have high expectations. That's the nature of this business, and we understand that, and we need to continue to raise expectations with whoever's out there.
My favorite part of that cut is if you hear it there in the middle when he's like, I don't understand the first part of your question. When I asked about, again, the defensive line makes a bunch of money. Vrabel says he expects a lot out of them. I'm like, Peter was drafted 11th. And if you hear there where Vrabel's like, I don't really understand the first part, and I say, higher expectations, I honestly think Vrabel gets a little pissed. But guess what? I mean, you use the 11th pick on him. And I do love, again, the question, how's Peter doing? Or, what's wrong with Peter? Or, yeah, he's doing well. Do you love your wife? Yeah, I do. You know what I mean? It's not overly, trying to think of the right way to say this.
Convincing?
Yeah, convincing. It's just not very convincing. Phone line driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. Again, the question, has Vrabel been accountable for the offensive line? Wes in Clarksville says, why can't they just admit they screwed up? And again, this is what happens, is it's very easy to say when it comes to building a team, you don't like the way John Robinson's doing it. I can do it. It's very easy to say that. It's a lot harder to actually do it. And I think that by Vrabel admitting that they screwed up, it would lead to the talk being, do we have any belief that they can fix it this upcoming season? And I don't know exactly why Vrabel can't admit when he screws up. I don't know why. I mean, I think it's part of life that nobody's right all the time. And so...
You think he admits that in private, like to the other coaches when it's not to the media?
Like that he screwed up on Dillard?
Or like, hey, we screwed up on this, or what led us to screw up on this, or something like that.
Does it matter?
Maybe.
See, I would argue...
I guess I see what you're saying. Like, hey, if you're not going to admit it publicly, does it matter? But you want them to be able to fix it.
Yeah, like what good does that do you when it's like, I know in my heart I screwed up, but I'm not going to tell anybody that I screwed up.
Well, I mean, part of me is just wondering if he doesn't want to admit it to some of the media there, more so than admitting that he was wrong. I
mean, that's a problem in and of itself, if that is the case. But
Maybe.
I hear what you're saying.
Maybe.
And I think, again, I don't know. I've told you that every coach I've ever met, they've all been fired because, again, when you get hired to get fired. Every coach I've ever met always says things like, yeah, we were 5-2, and then we went on the road, and our running back broke his toe, and then we got a punt blocked, and it was because we had to call a guy up from the practice squad, and, it's always not their fault. It's always like some sympathy plea. But then when they're talking about other people or they're talking about jobs when they get them, it's like, oh, yeah, if we screw up, we know we're getting fired. And I just think that's kind of the nature of the beast when it comes to these jobs. I don't understand what it is, but that's just kind of, again, the way that it works. One texter says, you're overestimating Vrabel. He's really not as intelligent as you give him credit for. Find one public speech or locker room speech or press conference speech or interview where Vrabel sounds really smart. Like even on with Bussin' with the Boys, he sounded dumb. Come on, buddy. What great thing has Vrabel ever said that made you go, oh, dang, he's really smart? Seriously, have Ian go looking for just one short soundbite from Vrabel when he sounds really smart. You won't find one. I don't think Vrabel's stupid.
I don't think he's dumb.
I think Vrabel's arrogant, and I think that his arrogance might, I've said this to my dad, I think this season has made him stupider. I think this year has made him dumber. Like that he is doing things that he would not have done in the past but because of the pressure and his screw-ups and everything else, he is doing dumb crap that he normally wouldn't do. Like Jalen Duncan at left tackle is freaking stupid. I'm sorry. You've got two left tackles at left tackle and left guard, right? Skoronski played left tackle in college. He was a first-team All-American. When Jalen Duncan got drafted, and I was watching the draft on either ESPN or NFL Network, they flashed up a graphic that said most sacks allowed in the Big Ten. So you spend all offseason saying, gotta protect the quarterback, gotta protect the quarterback, gotta protect the quarterback. And now, midway through the year, the guy you're playing at left tackle is the guy, and this is not a knock on Duncan, he just shouldn't be in that spot. Like, is the guy that led the Big Ten in sacks allowed. When a guy who was the best left tackle in the Big Ten last year is playing left guard. Again, I think this year has made him dumber. Texter into the text line says, Jared, do you admit when you screwed up, like when you predicted that the Titans were going to win 10 or 11 games at the start of this year? Yes! We have a running guarantee count. Do we not, Ian?
We do, yes.
And let me say this. You know the guarantee I'm getting a little worried about right now?
What's that?
When Fitz and I got into it about Lamar Jackson, and I said, did I say Lamar will never go to the AFC Championship game?
Let me double check on that.
I'm getting worried about that. Like, I'm getting worried that I said this summer Lamar Jackson will never get to an AFC Championship game, and right now I'm looking at the landscape of the AFC, and I'm thinking I might have giant egg on my face. So to answer your question, yes.
Jared says Lamar Jackson will never get to an AFC Championship game.
I'm getting nervous about that one. Travis is up next here on the program. Thank you for calling. What's up, Travis?
Oh, nothing much, Jared. I was optimistic, too, about the season, man, so don't feel bad about that. But Peter Skoronski is an absolute disaster, and I have two questions for you. How bad do you think Will Levis is hurt, like career-threatening, and does the left tackle being so bad, I mean, does that put egg on Peter Skoronski's face, too? I'll hang up and listen. Thank you.
You know what? As far as Levis is concerned, I don't think it's career-threatening or anything like that. I think, again, there's a big difference between a low ankle sprain and a high ankle sprain, and I don't know if it's a high ankle sprain, and then it's like how severe is the high ankle sprain. I know this. One time I was playing pickup basketball, rolled my ankle when I was in high school. I thought I broke it, and when I was shocked when I got an x-ray and it wasn't broken. And I saw the same thing happen this year to Riley Leonard, the Duke quarterback, when they played Notre Dame. And he got hurt at the very end of the game, and he hurt his ankle and was hopping around, and you could tell he thought he broke it. And then it only ended up being a sprain. When Levis said after the game that they're lucky that it wasn't worse, I'm thinking that he thought he broke it, which would make it a high ankle sprain, which I would assume would make him out for the year most likely. Who knows? So just that. As far as the Duncan Skoronski thing, I don't know if that means anything as far as Skoronski's concerned to Duncan. And some people say it is, some people say it isn't. But guess what? We'll ask Trevor. He'll join us next. I want Trevor's full breakdown of the Texan game, of the offensive line, how it's so bad, why it's so bad, what the Texans did. Derrick Henry, is it Derrick? Is it the line? Is it both? I want Trevor's opinion, and we will do that next, as we always do. Stillman and Company, Barry Trotz at 5 o'clock, 102.5, 106.3 The Game.
Well, let's see how Tennessee handles this here, as they're going to set up for 3rd and 8. Arch, you don't get any yards here, then potentially 4th and 7, 4th and 8. What do you do with the football right around midfield? Tennessee right on the fringe of their playoff chances dwindling.
Because in theory, you don't really have anything to lose, but if you end up punting, then you're essentially conceding the tie.
Levis is thrown for just under 200 yards. Here they come again, and they get to Levis again. Desmond King. Boy, Levis is in pain. He's hurt. You see him clutching down at his left leg. Oh, boy. He has been beaten and battered in this game. 7 sacks produced by this Houston defense.
Well, that's...
Just hate to see this. With this town abuzz over this kid starting to come into his own at quarterback. And it's that lower left leg that they are looking at with the athletic trainers.
Yeah, this is a shame.
It was bad. All bad. Trevor Maddox joins us, as always, presented by Houston Clinic Orthopedics, when experience matters. Trevor, your full analysis of the Titans' offensive line on Sunday, the 7 sacks against the Texans.
I can do that analysis in one word, Jarrett. Putrid. Putrid as in the smell and the odor is so offensive to the human soul and being that just the beginning of smelling it makes you want to throw up and lose control of all of your bodily functions. That's how bad this offensive line was as a group in this game.
Trevor, as far as the Titans line is concerned, how much of it was bad players? How much of it was bad coaching? How much of it was bad play calling? How much of it was good things done by the Texans? I mean, kind of give me a chart here.
Well, I thought I wasn't nearly as down on the play calling as a lot of people are. I thought they did a lot of things, and they have for the last several weeks, to try to help the offensive line with chips from tight ends and running backs to help them on pass protection. Not every time, but quite a few times, with different kinds of runs that kind of gave them an advantage where theoretically they should be able to double team at the point of attack and then come off to the next level. Others, so the defense couldn't just zero in on that. They'd have down, around, where they'd have man blocking, they'd pull, and they did different things to try to help them. And it still didn't work. Now, what was it that didn't work in those things? Well, when they would double team very often, they just get split. I mean, there was a tackle for loss over left guard, where left guard and left tackle went to double team on the defender right in between them. Neither one of them really blocked that guy, and he just went right between them, and both the left guard and the left tackle went up for the linebacker, while the defensive tackle that they tried to double team was 3 yards deep in the backfield making a tackle. Mm-hmm. So this kind of a thing happened way too often. From a passing standpoint, the book is out on these guys, and it has been for much of the season, that if you run stunts and twists, they can't pick it up. And that's on run stunts. When you expect to run, you run a certain kind of a twist that frees up a guy coming across at the line of scrimmage. Pass stunts, which gets guys free to attack the quarterback. And this offensive line just can't pick those up. It's almost a guarantee that you're going to have pressure on the quarterback at least if you run a stunt. And then it got inside everybody's head because they started to run a stunt, and one of Skoronski's bad plays, really his worst play, was actually one of the best moves I've ever seen from a defensive lineman on a pass rush. He had the defensive tackle lined up outside him. This is Skoronski. And that defensive tackle went inside and started a rip move inside as if he were the drive man on another stunt. So Skoronski committed to shut off that drive man because that had been burning them all game long, all season long. And then the defensive lineman pulled that rip out and put his arm to the outside and clubbed Skoronski to the inside, the direction Skoronski was going to try to shut off what he thought was the drive man on the stunt. And he just came unblocked from that point. Right up the middle. I think it was a sack. Either that or it was a big hit on the quarterback. You know, their heads right now, this offensive line, are so messed up that they're not even able to get their maximum ability, as limited as it might be at certain positions, brought to bear in the game. It's awful to watch.
Trevor, is Peter Skoronsky trending towards being a bust?
No. No, I don't think so. I think he actually is the only one, as you look at that offensive line, that you could say, yeah, okay, this guy's going to develop into an outstanding player for us. You've got no hope on any of the other guys. The best you could hope for is that they could develop into a pretty good backup. I think Dylan Radins at right tackle right now actually is showing signs of getting better to the point to where they might be able to rely on him as a pretty good backup. Brunskill at right guard, same way. Pretty good backup. The problem is if you've got them playing next to each other as starters, then things start to fall apart. But Skoronsky, you could see his ability. You can see his potential. You can kind of get a feel for his future. Some of the things that happened to him that he's getting just excoriated for, I'm not really terribly worried about. For example, there was one play where he gave up, I think it was a sack or a hit on the quarterback. They hit the quarterback 11 times. They're starting to run together in my mind. But it looked like he just got run over and ended up on the ground. Well, that's not what happened. The center got run over, essentially, or he got slammed back. And so the center ended up getting driven back at Skoronsky's level. The center stuck his leg out where Skoronsky's right leg, his inside leg was. Skoronsky fell over that leg at the same time he was trying to address the bull rush right over him, and Skoronsky ended up on the ground. Well, things like that happen, but unfortunately for Skoronsky, he doesn't have a steady player inside of him at center that he can rely on to not trip him half the time. So you got problems like that happen with Skoronsky, I don't know, half a dozen times in this game, where it was something to that effect, where the guy next to him, he was either trying to help for too long, or the guy next to him was broken down so badly, it also broke down Skoronsky. For example, there was a sack that happened that, lots of sacks to choose from, where there was a stunt where Skoronsky had the drive man. And so that guy was trying to penetrate the inside gap between the left guard, Skoronsky, and the center. So Skoronsky stepped inside and stayed there for too long. And he tried to help the center for too long, knowing that the center was probably going to get run over as soon as he left that guy. So Skoronsky was late coming back to the outside on the loop man, didn't get him at all. But the loop man didn't make the sack. The sack was made by the drive man, because even when Skoronsky helped the center for way too long, the center still got driven back into the quarterback for the sack. So, the things that Skoronsky is doing in tandem with the guys on either side, it's such a nightmare that he's on as this island of capability at left guard that things look bad on him that really aren't his fault as much. Still, having said that, I don't think he had a very good game. I don't think he played his best game, but he didn't play nearly as bad as a lot of people are writing right now in the media.
Trevor, how much of the problems the Titans have about not being able to stop a stunt, what sounds like basic stuff, correct me if I'm wrong, for NFL offensive linemen to be able to do, how much of that is a coaching issue and how much of it is a lack of talent issue?
I think right now it's a lack of talent issue. You can see him trying to do it. For example, you can see Duncan at left tackle trying to stop a drive man when the stunt where he's got the drive man and Skoronsky's guys loops outside. You see him trying to do that. He just doesn't have the functional strength to do that. He needs a year or two in an NFL weight room in order to get enough functional strength to know if the guy can actually play. I kind of think he'll be a decent player in about 2 years. But right now, it's as if you or I went in there to play. We could be in the right spot, Jared, but we would get overwhelmed physically. And right now, Duncan at left tackle is getting overwhelmed physically. And so that's something that coaching is not going to help. And I think picking up these stunts, the way defenders and defensive coordinators have figured out the team is so weak at doing. And on the right side, they're not very good at it. On the left side, they are absolutely unable unable to pick up a stunt. I don't think there's much a coach can do at this point because he's got guys in position to do it. But those guys that are in position to do it are just getting smashed.
Trevor, how much of Derrick Henry's record-setting performance, most carries, least amount of yards in NFL history, how much of that's Derrick Henry's fault? How much of that's the line's fault? How much of that is the play calling fault? What do you make of it?
Yeah, well, he averaged 2 per carry in this game. That's not 2 yards, which would be bad. It was 2 feet per carry. And I don't really think any of it was his fault. You could see the frustration build as the game went on, as he kept on taking a handoff, and he'd have a defender 2 yards deep in the backfield at the point of attack over and over and over and over and over again. And you can't really blame him for that. He's the kind of a guy that can make you miss, but he's more of a guy that gets up ahead of steam and then pile drives you. And he can't get up ahead of steam when the defender is as deep in the backfield almost as he is when he takes the handoff. So I don't blame him. This was a great job by the Texans defensive front and linebackers, by the way, of firing and hitting the gaps, of using run stunts to get penetration. And often that penetration was unblocked or almost unblocked. And they just did it over and over again. And they didn't just do the same thing. I mean, one of those times there was penetration by a linebacker just outside the left tackle, Jalen Duncan, and it wasn't his guy. On the edge, you had a tight end and actually a wide receiver. Traylon Burks was the wide receiver that were supposed to double team the tight end, or excuse me, the outside linebacker, and then come off on that other guy who fired through the C gap. And that C gap is between the tackle and the tight end. Well, the thing is, the tight end didn't see that guy penetrating. He didn't come off of the other linebacker on the line of scrimmage. And so it was a completely unblocked guy firing through the gap at the point of attack, unblocked. And Derrick Henry's in the backfield just getting sworn before he could get started. So that was on the tight end, basically. So there's a lot of blame to go around here.
Trevor Maddich is with us. Last one for you on this, which is, what would you say to the people that argue that Tajay Spears got more yards, so Tajay Spears should be running the ball more than Derrick Henry for this team?
You can make the case that Spears has a better ability to make guys miss in the backfield. And because of that, not because he's better than Henry, he's not, but because he's got more of that capability, they probably have a better chance to succeed because instead of Henry getting swarmed in the backfield, you've got Spears who can make a guy or two miss in the backfield or at the point of attack better than Henry can typically do it, at least on a more regular basis than Henry does it. And that gives him a chance to overcome the deficiency of the blockers in front of him. So I can see that possibility, but not because there's anything wrong with Henry, not at all. It's like behind a bad offensive line, sometimes you'll make a switch at quarterback because your pocket passer is getting overwhelmed and you really need to put a guy back there at quarterback who's a scrambler who can make guys miss when they're not being blocked correctly and then extend the play by scrambling. That kind of happens not because of the quarterback position needs a change, but because the blockers can't handle it. I think you're seeing some of that right now with the running game, and it wouldn't hurt to give Spears opportunities. But then again, Spears is also a very good receiver out of the backfield. Henry, they targeted him 4 times. He caught all 4 passes. It's like the one thing the play caller can do, the offensive coordinator, Kelly, can do is be even more creative with the different kinds of screens that he runs. And there are lots of screens and lots of very deceptive screens. And there are counters off of screens that he actually could add into it that I think would help this team because you've got to bypass the offensive line rather than try to have the offensive line bust holes in the defensive front because this offensive line can't do it, especially now that the book on them has been firmly written. Every D-line is going to be doing the same thing. And this O-line just can't do anything about it. So you kind of have to go to some other way to allow the linemen to block, which is to say, let them block guys downfield on different kinds of screens.
Trevor Maddich is with us. What does he think about Mike Vrabel and the job that he's doing? We will do that next. Stillman & Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Trevor Maddich is with us, presented by Houston Clinic Orthopedics, when experience matters. Trevor, I want Mike Vrabel out at the end of the year. If I owned the team, he would be gone. So would the general manager, and I'm going to tell you exactly why. There's a bunch of reasons, but the biggest one being that they said their number one goal this offseason was to fix the offensive line. And the best they did for me was Andre Dillard, Aaron Brewer, Chris Hubbard, Daniel Brunskill, Peter Skoronski, and this ragtag group that with 3 games remaining has already given up more sacks this year than they did all of last year, and their line last year was atrocious. That's enough for me. I have no faith for them to fix it. Do you think Mike Vrabel needs to go?
No, I'd push back on that. I think the personnel, Vrabel, unless he has veto power over everything, and he chose all this, then I think you've got to say, okay, well, he's the head coach, he's giving his input, and it's the front office that makes these decisions. Injuries you can't really account for, and injuries have been a big part of the problem here. I mean, last year the offensive line was bad, and I thought the offensive line would be improved because those same guys like Nicholas Petit-Frere, et cetera, had a chance to really grow over the offseason. They got some playing time in last year. I thought they'd be better. But then you had key injuries, especially at tackle. And so these are things that
Hubbard
the head
got
coach,
hurt.
Hubbard got hurt. And the thing is, it's sort of an accident that he is on the team at all. But it turned out that he was one of their more steady players once he got here. Nicholas Petit-Frere got himself suspended, then got himself hurt. And so that kind of crushed everything. The center position you've been on for a long time, and you're right. I mean, Brewer's not a starting center. The thing is, though, I don't know that I fire the head coach because of that. I think the front office needs to do a better job of getting guys in, but at the same time, you've got to be very careful to not overpay for the wrong guys just because you have such a desperate need for somebody. And so sometimes it takes a little bit of time to put this together. The question that needs to be asked is, in the draft, when they drafted other positions, were there equally graded offensive linemen available or even higher that they passed on? Or was there just nobody that was graded high enough to be taken in that spot? These are the kinds of things that we need to know before we can make that decision.
Well,
but from a Vrabel standpoint, go ahead.
Well, to your point, we don't know who's making the call as far as drafting, who made the call to draft Skoronski, right? Broderick Jones was available. Tackle is more important than guard. Why not take a tackle over a guard? I don't know. But we don't know who's making these decisions, whether it's Vrabel or Carthon, and they say they collaborate on decisions, but as well as I do, that's bullcrap. Like, somebody has to decide, we're taking the guard, we're taking the tackle, and they won't tell us because they know that the second that they tell us, that's who's getting blamed for Andre Dillard and Aaron Brewer and all these other guys.
Yeah, the only reason that I can see that they should move on from Vrabel is if it's clear that his leadership is stale in the locker room, if the players are no longer responding to him. That happens, not because a coach is a bad coach all of a sudden, but because sometimes you just need a change. And if that's the case, and I don't know that it is or is not, then that would be a reason to move on from Vrabel. As it is, when you look at, possibly bringing in a retread coach or taking a chance on a coordinator or somebody who's never been a head coach, those are all chances. What you know about Vrabel, though, is that when he's got the roster the way that he wants it, he is a very, very good coach. He has a personal demeanor of toughness. That's how he played the game. That's how he coaches the game. And when you look at when he's had his offensive line the way he wants it, I mean, just go back, 3-4 years when he had Taylor Lewan and, guys like that. Ben Jones was playing center. Roger Saffold was playing guard. Jack Conklin was at the other tackle. They were just mashing people, and Derrick Henry was laying waste to people. Well, they don't have that right now. And I don't think that Vrabel blocked anybody in those years when the offensive line was very good before it began to deteriorate for various reasons, including injury of those guys, and they ended up having to get replaced. But I don't think it's his fault also that this offensive line has been seriously banged up and is not populated with enough talent. I think it might be but it's only if he said, listen, Rand Carthon, general manager, this is who you're going to take, and you're not going to take that other guy that you want, in which case you have a completely different kind of a problem. But when Vrabel has his guys that are talented and they're hard nosed, then he tends to bring kind of counter programming to the NFL, where instead of having a flashy passing game and going against, and facing defenses that are built to stop flashy passing games, he's got a hard-nosed run first, mash you offense, which matches Vrabel's own personality, going against defenses that are set up to stop flashy passing games. And that gives them an advantage if the O-line is up to snuff and if they've got the personnel in terms of quarterbacks and receivers that could then make play action pass a truly dangerous thing. And we've seen it work, and we've seen it work brilliantly. Right now, the personnel is not there. And so the degree to which you can blame the personnel problems on Vrabel, okay, you can talk about whether he should be back. But other than that, I don't think there should be a big hurry to move on from Vrabel, just in part because of how well he does when he's got his kind of guys, and in part because, well, who else are you going to bring in? The grass isn't always greener.
I just kind of always feel, though, like it's very easy when it's coming to the coach to say, well, it's not him, it's the players. And we don't know exactly how much time. Hey, Max, look over there. Look at the TV. But there's, sorry about that. But there's there's this sense to me that, like, Vrabel, he's at least a co-owner in the personnel that they have. And to me, that makes him complicit. Does that make any sense?
Oh, that does make sense. And you know more about the workings of the front office and the
I don't.
personnel
Nobody
system
does.
than I do.
Nobody
Okay.
knows, Trevor.
Well, then that's what we would need to find out, I think, as fans before we would call for a change in the head coaching position. Because once again, I just look at this offense and I see what they have available right now. For whatever reason, I see what they've got available. And that goes to the receivers as well, because the receivers are not helping either. They're not getting open soon enough. They're not making enough plays and contested catches that they need to make, because the offensive line is not going to give the quarterback much time to throw. They do it sometimes, but they're not doing it enough. So all these things add up to, what could a coach do? I mean, Batman could be your coach. Vince Lombardi could be your coach, right? It doesn't matter if these are the guys that are having to play. So what we would want to find out is, why is it that these are the guys that are available? And this is going to be a massive offseason, because you are right, Jared, and I've heard you talk about how we don't really know in a lot of ways what Rand Carthon's doing, what Mike Vrabel's doing in terms of personnel, in terms of who's making the choices. The thing is, this offseason, the choices that are necessary are so abundantly clear that I think fans are going to be able to look at it and give a really clear check yes or no to what's happening in this front office.
Trevor Matich, as always, joining us, presented by Houston Clinic Orthopedics, when experience matters. Trev, great stuff. We will talk next week.
Thanks, Jared.
Predators general manager Barry Trotz, they are red hot. And I know he probably doesn't want me to talk about it too much, because if I do, then it might jinx it, because, that's how it works around here. Will join us next at the desk, Stillman & Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game, streaming live on Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook live from the Hiller Plumbing, Heating, Cooling, and Electrical Studios, Bridgestone Arena. Preds tonight against the Vancouver Canucks. Predators general manager Barry Trotz is with us, as always, presented by Gary Force Acura and by Pourvu. And if you are having the family over for the holidays, Pourvu's got 10,000 square feet of wine, spirits, and over 1,500 domestic import and craft beers with a massive array of ready-to-drink cocktails. And Barry, before we get you started, how about we give away some tickets?
We can. We might have to go over there first, where you're just.
We'll go hit Pourvu and then go give away some tickets?
Yeah, absolutely.
Be caller 5 right now at 615-737-1025, and you're going to see the Predators take on the Chicago Blackhawks at Bridgestone Arena on Tuesday, January 2nd. Tickets available at nationalpredators.com/tickets. Barry, my old boss, our old program director, Ryan Porth, texted me Friday night, and he said, the Predators are fun again. After, once again, Philip Forsberg puts the puck in the net about 6 seconds into the start of overtime. It has been a wild ride so far this season, but do you feel like the team is exactly where you want them as we approach the holidays?
Actually, yes, and maybe a little bit ahead of where I thought they would be. I mean, we had talked, a little over a month ago. We were 5-10, and I said, we should be a little bit better, but this is going to be a little bit of a year where we're going to have to enjoy the ride, the good and the bad. And we sort of got on a little bit of a heater, and we were getting big goals. What I like about it is our top guys are our top guys again, and the young guys are chipping in and being more consistent. And our team has got the identity that Bruno wants to implement. So we're scoring some goals. I look at our team, early in the year, I was saying, goaltending needs to be a little bit better. Our penalty kill needs to be better. Power play was the only thing that was sort of going for us, in a little bit of 5-on-5. Now I look at our whole game, and there's, our penalty kill has got better. Our power play has stayed pretty consistent. Goaltending is heating up. All those areas, our 5-on-5 game's pretty solid. So, we're sort of coming together. Like I said, I don't know how it's going to play out. It's going to be a wild ride, I think, for the rest of the year. But at the same time, these guys, show up every night, and it's been fun. I mean, I'd like to know what the record is of the 3 fastest overtime goals by one player.
Mm-hmm.
Phil's got 3, and I think the combine is probably the longest into the overtime is about 18-20 seconds maybe, and he's been hot. So we'll take the points when we can get them, that's for sure, because it's really hard to do that in this league.
So going with Phil, I was thinking about this when you took the job as the general manager and you made the coaching change. And I would say in hockey circles, I don't think around here a lot of people were too upset about that, but I do think that in hockey circles, it was kind of a controversial decision to move on from John and to bring in Andrew Burnett. And I wonder, when you made that move, was that so that we would be seeing the Philip Forsberg that we're seeing today? How much of this is he was a good player and this coach has unlocked him to another level?
Well, I think, that was the vision. I always felt that Andrew's always had that ability to connect with those top players, and especially, power play guys and all that. But this falls on Phil. Phil has done a really good job. I mean, you remember he got hurt last year. Was a big hole in the lineup. But really, he trained all summer. I watched him endlessly, just absolutely burying himself day in and day out, and putting in the work and doing all that. And all those things that he's done, I think, has really, really got him in a really good place. And I think having Ryan O'Reilly, and I think I said it, they had a marriage right at training camp. There was something special going on, and I think those two made a connection, and I think they really enjoyed playing on the same line, but also I think they see how valuable they are to the success that we have. And I always felt that Philip is an absolute superstar, and he's playing like it this year for sure.
Do you think there's another level with him?
I do. The one thing with Philip, and it's hard to do in this league, because if you're a good player, you're getting the best, hardest matchups. Guys are digging into you a little harder, so it's harder to put up those numbers. But when Phil plays that I call that heavy big man's game, his skills just come out. When he just tries to use his hands and not necessarily that big strong body, I think he becomes a little bit less productive. I think he's got a really good balance this year, and if he continues that for the whole year, I think he'll be right up there with the best in the league in terms of the scoring.
So you had a plan coming into the season, thinking about where the team was going to be, and the plan is not just about what the Nashville Predators look like, but what the Nashville Predators may look like 2 years from now, 3 years from now. Has it changed with the way the team has played as you approach kind of the first of the year, knowing that the trade deadline season is about to cook up a little bit, knowing that you've got cap space, what other teams don't have? Is there kind of a mindset here of, we thought maybe there was a chance we'd be selling off some of these parts to get some more picks for the future, but now, hey, this team might be a legitimate, I'm not going to say a cup contender, but a contender to get into the second round. And once you get there, you've lived this life. You do whatever.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's this game is always full of surprises and disappointments.
You mean like when you were down 2-0 against Columbus and ended up winning the cup?
Absolutely. You get tested in so many ways. So I think, we have the vision of 3-4 years. If we can improve the hockey club, that will make sense for us now and maybe, for a year or two down the road or 3 or 4 years down the road, we will look at that and do that. We talked about trying to get more offensive players through the draft. Great thing is we've got Matthew Wood and Tanner Molendyke, who are both underages playing at the World Championships, Junior Championships with Team Canada, which is it's a big step. I don't think we've had that many guys with Team Canada for quite a while. So they hopefully will be, they'll be the underages. So we'll see if they get much playing time or not. But at the same time, they are probably circled as prime guys for next year as well for that team because they're still underages. So the future's bright with us. We said we got to get want to get some more scoring, get more offensive. You see the way we play it's a lot more eye appealing and fan appealing. Plus we're scoring more.
Mm-hmm.
We were looking at where's our goals going to come from. Well, you see the way we play, it comes from everybody, but especially when your top guys are going, your power play is consistent, and you got the belief system that this group has, you're gonna have some success. So the plan is still the plan. It will have to change if we're there at the deadline. The players will decide that. I really won't. If we're right there at the deadline, then we may tweak it a little bit. From now to the deadline, if something comes up that makes sense for the now and the future, we'll look at that. But we're not going to, risk our future, if you will, because the goal is to get to that ultimate goal and get this whole group going really well. And speaking of young guys, the Milwaukee Admirals are playing very well. You saw a guy like Spencer Stastny come up here. We got Joachim Kemmel, Sveshkov, Schaefer. They're all getting better and better, which is really, really great for us. And it gives what it'll do is, if they can have success together at the American League level, that's going to translate in the future for us at this level. And also from a salary cap standpoint, it really sets us up for a really good situation down the road. So I like what we've done. I think Scott Nichols done a great job with our development program down there, and Carl Taylor and the staff and coaching the guys. So I think we're trending in a really good situation, and hopefully we can stay healthy and keep competing with the good teams like this. I look at this week, and you got a team like Vancouver is one of the best teams in the National Hockey League. Philadelphia is one of the biggest surprises this week, and Dallas is right there, right ahead of us. So we got a really big week, and I always sort of chuckle about as a coach at this week. It's a little bit of a box of chocolates. You don't know what you're going to get, especially during Christmas, because you got families coming in. We're doing the Father's Trip. There's a lot of games. Guys are just trying to get to that, the finish line for Christmas.
Okay, so I am actually close with Santa. And I do wonder, going back to the trade deadline and how you feel about the team right now, if I were going back to Santa and I were to say, hey, Barry has been very good this year, what is it that you would like from Santa to add to your hockey club? What would you want me to tell Santa?
I would say that I need some more offense. I need a legitimate secondary threat that can go, in the lineup next to Philip Forsberg and O'Reilly, and that's a real threat that, put up some points, and those are hard to come by in the league, Obviously at the center ice is really hard in this league, and high point producing guys, scorers in this league are hard to come by. So that's what Barry would want from Santa for the team.
So you were talking about the father's trip that's coming up, and apparently the roster freeze sets in tonight.
Yeah.
And I do wonder, is there going to be any kind of finagling of the roster, knowing that you're kind of stuck after tonight until the first of the year?
No. Right now there's nothing imminent. But this business is funny. Like, there's days when I've said, you know what, there's nothing going on. I'm gonna head out and run a couple errands, and then the phone rings, and you're like, 7 hours later you're still in the office, and you're wondering what happened. So. But right now, I've talked to a number of teams just before the freeze, and also I'm going to see a lot of the general managers over at the World Championships in Sweden next week. So just touching base with them, and we threw some things around, but there's nothing really imminent. But you never know. You're just a phone call away, and someone goes, you know what, I want to do this before the freeze, which is 6 or 7 hours away right now, type of thing. So. We'll see, but I don't anticipate anything, but never say never.
Barry Trotz is with us. You talked about the young guys at Milwaukee and kind of, what's coming there, and not going to sacrifice the future of the Nashville Predators for the present, which I think a lot of people would agree with, including me. But what I do wonder is, how important was it for you to spend that time where you were kind of observing with David last year, to be able to now have a real feel about which prospects you believe in down the road, which guys you think, maybe these rankings have them a little too high, and maybe they could be used in a potential trade? Or how important is that, so that as you approach kind of the trade season, what you really have in the lower levels?
Yeah, no, it's really important. I got a chance to watch Milwaukee last year, and they had a long run. I've been watching all the Milwaukees. I've had hockey heaven lately, because with the start times with our games and different people we're looking at in Milwaukee, I can watch them almost simultaneously with the 6 o'clock start and the 7 o'clock start.
Do you have two TVs up next to each other,
so
you're able to?
Yeah.
Okay.
And a lot of times I'm in contact with Scott Nickel, because he's watching Milwaukee, and we'll comment between periods about certain players or how we feel we're playing. And I think it's really important. I would say that every team in the National Hockey League probably not overrates their prospects, because they love their prospects. They drafted them. They want to develop them. So what someone would have our prospects, might be not as high as we have them, but we'll have the same thing on theirs, and that's how it is. I mean, a lot of times I'll look at some of the ratings. I'm going, we can get this guy. He's and then when you really get down to it, you talk to your scouts and all that. They go, no, we'd rather stay with our guy. Be it a young player in Milwaukee or someone on our team that's young. No, we feel he's a better player, so let's go that route. So, but it's really important for me to know our players, to make good decisions with. It's really important for me to know the prospects that are going to be drafted this year.
Sure.
That's really in Jeff Kelty and the scouting department's area. But I think if I'm doing my job, I should know the prospects as well, so I can have those intelligent questions asked and say, listen, okay, I know you like this guy, but I'm not seeing it. Prove it to me. Tell me why. And
not only that, because you're the guy that gets fired over those decisions.
Yeah, you do. It's really the scouting staff, and it's like that in every league. My name goes on it, even though I might not have hardly seen the player.
Sure.
But my name goes on it. So I think it's really important that you know your own prospects, and you know the type of team that I want to have here play in Nashville, and make sure that we don't have duplicates. It's really easy when you get to the scouting table. I think sometimes you say, we'll take the best player, but we have duplicates we have duplicate defensemen,
sure.
We have duplicate wingers. So maybe we bypass that and let's look at maybe centermen, or let's look at a profile of a big D versus a smaller skating D. So having those things lined up for our scouts, I think they appreciate that. They don't look at it. They look at, we're asking them to tell us who the best players are. They're not building the team. So it's up to myself to communicate that to Jeff Kelty and Scott Nickel and Brian Poyle and our management team, so that we're all on the same page and we understand that, just because we can take this player, we have duplicates, maybe there's a better fit by trading them away or moving down or not taking that pick. So those are the things that I want to be prepared for June, which you have to do now.
Barry Trotz, as I said, I'm friends with Santa, and I will pass along your request to him and see where you go from there. Have a very Merry Christmas. Enjoy the games before the holiday. Enjoy the holiday. Enjoy, where you say you were going, Switzerland for the
Sweden.
Sweden?
Yeah.
I mix them up, and I should not do that. Enjoy that for the scouting and everything else. Really appreciate your time. As always, good luck tonight.
All right, thank you.
Yep, Barry
You have a great
Trotz with
Christmas.
us. Absolutely. We will roll along. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Barry Trotz says on the program, Philip Forsberg is an absolute superstar. He thinks there is another level for Forsberg to go. Said that if he had to ask Santa for anything, it would be for more offense, secondary scoring to go along with Forsberg and O'Reilly. And Willie Donick is mad at me, Ian.
What'd you do this time?
So Willie did say to me before they left after the midday show, he said, hey, you need to ask Barry Trotz about Carrier and Lausanne. And I was going to try to work it in, but we went to break at 20 after.
We have been bashing Carrier and Lausanne for a couple of years. You probably deserved a question on that.
Here's the thing. First of all, I could not have asked that over any of the other questions that we asked because I felt like we asked some pretty important questions. But more importantly, you've been just as down on those two guys as I have.
More so Lausanne, but that's fair.
I mean, you've been down on them too.
Yes.
So it's not just me. I am not moving off of my criticisms of those two. I am not ready. It's too early.
There's a Carrier guarantee in here somewhere about Carrier. Let me find it. Stall for just a second.
Okay, that I can do. So my response today when Willie was like basically giving me the I told you so on Carrier and Lausanne, but specifically on Lausanne, my thing was my biggest problem with Lausanne was the second-round pick that they traded for him, and I was like, wait a minute, what? So I've got the good excuse that the Boston Bruins have probably found, if not a first-line center, a second-line center, a couple of picks after the pick that you traded for Lausanne to Seattle. So it's like I'd rather have what's the kid's name, Poitras or Potteris or whatever his name is? Patra, that's it. I'd rather have him, than a third-pair defenseman for a second-round pick.
Yes, I do have a Carrier guarantee here. This says, Jared guarantees that Alexander Carrier will not be on the team in 2 years. That was said on Tuesday, May 31st of 2022. So if he's still on the team at the end of the season,
No. Would that be for next season?
Well, 2 years.
I mean, May.
So May of 24. That's this upcoming
But May is the
spring.
end of the season. So I'm thinking the start of the 2024-5 season.
We'll have to have some clarification on that.
We'll have to go over that. Again, it's too early on that stuff. I stand by it, but let's play some big boy hockey. And we all know that while all these games are important, and I told Barry off the air before we went on the interview, I said, my favorite part about this season is the way the Predators have played so far to begin this year means that down the stretch, so February and March, that's going to be some real hockey. Like, that's going to be some serious grab your ass. Like, they're going to try to make the playoffs. Like, there's going to be some fun hockey around here for all of that. And we haven't had it, where it's been fun. It's almost been painful the last couple of years because you knew that it was inevitable, whatever would happen in the playoffs. But this, this is different. Like, this year is going to be, at least it feels like it's a little different right now. But let's get to some big boy hockey, and then we can talk. Like, let's be able to keep the puck out of the net in your own end in these big boy hockey games, and then let's try to stay on our skates if we're Alexander Carrier when we get into some of these big boy hockey games. But we have been very hard on them. And I'll also say this, and this is my thing. This is the first question I asked Barry was about Philip Forsberg. And I said, when you made the coaching change, did you foresee this? Because I have said, like, outside of the beginning of the season when the Predators, lost those games on that road trip and I was ready to declare the season over, which obviously they've done a 180 since then. But when that happened, I really looked at the game. And I looked at the team and the games and the season, and I'm like, this team barely missed the playoffs last year, and they upgraded at coach. Which I thought, okay, we'll go ahead and put a 20% on everybody else. Everybody's going to be 20% better because of the change in coach. They went, in my opinion, from a bad coach to a good coach. Everybody else will tell you they went from a good coach with a different style to a good coach with a no. They went from a bad coach to a good coach, so everyone's going to be better. So when people are better, I'm not surprised by it because I felt like the change in coach was going to make a difference, and I think it has. And I think Forsberg is a great example of that. 615-737-1025 is our phone number, 615-737-1025. Coming up next, the Titans, when it comes to them. And it is funny after, what we've seen with the Predators. But I almost feel like the Titans are living the reality the Predators lived for the last couple of years. Why do we have to go through that again? We'll do that next. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game.
There's 2 more home games left, and you're eliminated from the playoffs. You talked about high expectations. What would be the team's message to the fans about the 2 home games to finish out the season and the belief in the program going forward into future seasons?
Well, I think the belief going forward, we can always discuss that. I mean, when our guys play hard, if you feel like our guys loaf consistently. I mean, obviously, there's a lot of snaps in the game. We could all pick them out. But, when we take the ball there at the end and, 3 negative plays on defense that, from guys that maybe have been here on the practice squad or just got here, and obviously playing with great effort is going to rally, a fan base. Winning always is going to be the forefront of what we do. And if we can, eliminate some of the plays that are going to get us beat, there's still good football in there. There is. It's all over the place. We go down, we convert a 4th and 1 on first drive of the game, hit a couple X plays, 3rd and 10, they jump off sides, we snap the ball. Will looks for the flag, we throw it down there to the 2-yard line, and we score. Like that's what good football teams do. But then there's just, there's the plays that, aren't consistent enough and not efficient enough defensively. Get an interception, get a 3rd down stop, but then we give up some plays that cost us. Special teams, we do a good job. We're protecting a punter, and get a penalty at a critical time in the game. So there's a lot of good in there. And again, I know that this sounds like it sounded a couple weeks ago, but unfortunately, there's just a lot of too many examples of the bad football that ultimately you can't overcome.
So that was Mike Vrabel's message to the fans. Ian, did you get anything out of that?
No, not really.
I asked it and I listened to it in live time.
Something about them
clip.
Playing hard. They like to play hard with good effort.
That's what I think that sounds like. Is what's the message to the fans to have belief that you can turn this around? We play hard. Oh, brother. And then he gets into there's still plenty of good football in there, but there's also plenty of bad football in there, and then you rehash the whole game. It's almost like I overloaded the circuits by asking about a message to the fans. Because what's great is when, say, look, these press conferences, they're not about the media. They're not about me. They're not about you. They're about the fans. That's what it's about. It's the coach talking to the media, relaying the message to the fans. And now the fans know how to find the press conferences themselves. So he's looking right into the camera. He's talking to you. And so, Ian, back me up on this. I almost didn't go to the press conference yesterday because I didn't want to get into a pissing contest with Vrabel and make the whole story about me and Vrabel. I wanted it to be about the Texans game and everything else that happened, right?
That's right.
So we even talked about that ahead of time. So in that press conference, his message to the fans, just, again, it was we play hard, and then there's still some good football, and then there's bad football, and whatever, that is. But I told Barry Trotz this when he joined us at the top of the hour, that on Friday night when Philip Forsberg scored 6 seconds or whatever it was into overtime for the 3rd time this year, Porth texted me, our old program director, who's now running the station out there in Chicago. Porth texted me and was like, the Predators are fun again. And I'm like, I know. All I did was beg and beg and beg for a new coach and a new general manager. And with each waking moment where it felt like they were not going to be able to get it done, it was like more and more people converted to the Church of Jared, to the point to where it got to that Colorado series. Everybody was thinking, please, please, please change something. Please change the GM. Please change the coach. And so then they changed the GM, and everybody was happy. And everybody went from being mad at David Poile to celebrating David Poile's legacy, to happy that Barry Trotz was coming in, and they got a new coach, and guess what? They're good again. It didn't take that long, did it? I didn't think they'd be this good this fast. Barry didn't think they'd be this good this fast. And what I feel about the Titans is that a lot of people, and I read your text into the text line, I'd say it's probably 60-40 on Vrabel. Most people don't really talk about Rand because we don't really know what Rand does or doesn't do. It's like the second that we criticize players that Rand brought in, it's, well, Rand didn't have the money, which I don't know if that's true or not, or Rand didn't make that pick. That was a Vrabel decision, and I don't know if that's true or not. But it's impossible not to argue with because nobody knows what they really do anymore. But it's really about Vrabel. And it's about 60-40, I would say. Move on from Vrabel, 40% keep Vrabel. And it's like, I want to give them another chance. And I'm like, it's going to be the same. It's going to be the same. Right now, they're doing a special on the NHL Network, which is on in front of me right here at the arena, about Matthew Patras of the Boston Bruins. Willie's all excited about Jeremy Lauzon and how he might be a good third-pair defenseman.
Second pair.
No, third. He said third today when he was talking to me.
Okay.
He might be a good third-pair defenseman. You traded a pick that could have been Patras for a third-pair defenseman. And I told you when they traded that pick, I said, oh, God. I was like, this just reeks of total desperation because a second-round pick is not nothing. That is what Roman Josi was. That is what Shea Weber was. Like, those second-round picks are important. But the GM was chasing, and so they went out and made that trade. And so we had to live through this. And if you bring back Vrabel and Carthon, there is no way I believe that they won't keep chasing. And I think chasing in a bad way. Trying to prove they're going to try to save their jobs. Floyd used to tell me that there were two options. There was do your job or protect your job. They're going to go out there and protect their job if they come back. And it'll be some more of the same, where they'll sign another Andre Dillard, and they will tell you that he's good, and then we'll get to training camp, see that he's not, and then they'll make excuses for him, then they'll play him in the games, and then it will get to the unexcusable portion of the season. And by then it's too late. And by then you've spent $100 million. And by then you've used a first-round draft choice that this year might be, 8th overall, 7th overall? I feel like it's inevitable. I feel like it is inevitable that these guys will fail. And I don't want to waste our time. I don't want to waste another season of just let's give it a chance. It was so bad in terms of offensive line construction this past year that I think it is completely inexcusable. I have no confidence that these guys are going to be able to turn this around. And nothing that Vrabel says, and Rand doesn't say anything, but nothing Vrabel says gives me confidence that he's going to be able to turn it around. Again, what was his up there? I said message to the fans. 3 games, 2 home games left the rest of the way. What is the message to the fans that they should believe in this team and support this team and the direction? And his answer was, they play hard. Well, they played hard with Andre Dillard. I didn't go into that Cleveland game where they got their asses spanked because they thought that they could put Andre Dillard man for man with Myles Garrett. I didn't go into that Cleveland game and walk out of it thinking, man, they're lazy. I didn't go into that thinking, man, they don't believe in the coach, I didn't say any of that. They've been playing hard all year. They played hard last year. But just because they play hard doesn't mean that I think they're going to win. And I know there's going to be people that say, well, Jared, you've been wrong before, and you're right. But I don't think I've ever been wrong about this. I take the idea of firing the coach very seriously in terms of getting on the radio and saying, I would fire the coach. And outside of Derek Mason at Vanderbilt, no coach in the 8 years I've been on the radio here has convinced me once I've crossed that red line of fire the coach, no coach has been able to convince me otherwise. John Hines didn't convince me otherwise. Ken Wisenhunt didn't convince me otherwise. And again, I don't usually say locally here I don't usually say fire the coach. Clark Lee, man, I'll tell you, it's tough, but I haven't said fire the coach yet. And so, I just think that what's going to happen if you bring them back is we're going to waste a year. And whatever does that mean waste a year of Levis's development? Does that mean waste a good pick? Does that mean waste a bunch of money? I just think it's going to be a waste because I don't think they can properly evaluate talent, and I don't think that the commission and the style with which the Titans want to run their organization makes any sense. I mean, I hear about the collaborating that they do. Oh, yeah, Mike and Rand and Chad Brinker and Anthony Robinson and the analytics people and the coaching staff. I mean, Barry Trotz is sitting there talking about, this guy's running the draft, this guy's running this guy. But I need to know, Barry Trotz said. And I said right to him, I said, yeah, because you're the one who gets fired over this. And he said yes. And so, I mean, I got to tell you, I just don't, I just think that, again, this is going to be just like the Predators. When after the 2021 season, when the Predators, had that little nice turnaround, got into the playoffs, played Carolina, and people were like, let's say, I think we can. I was like, nope. Time to change. Time to fire. Time to blow up. Time to change. No. And they had a nice little first half of the 2021-2022 season. But other than that, it was just a lot of wasted time, wasted hockey. They were never going to beat Colorado. They were never going to win a playoff series, even if Saros had been healthy. Last year, it didn't matter if they made the playoffs or not. They were never going to do anything in them. And now they got a new coach and a new general manager, and it's fresh around here. And like Ryan Porte said, it is fun to watch again. And that is how I feel about the Titans. One texter says, you media guys want the coaches to answer questions in the press conferences, but then you get on here and call for their jobs. It doesn't make sense in a good media and coach relationship. Well, I mean, I don't do this job to be friends with the coach. Does that make any sense? There is a conscious choice as a talk radio host. And I mean like a talk radio host who has a show that people listen to. There is a decision to make that is, do I want to be friends with people or do I want to keep it real? And I made the conscious choice that I wanted to keep it real. I was 24 years old working in Louisville, and I literally saw the fork in the road. In fact, there was a day where I sat there and I said, we had this consultant that had been at ESPN Radio for forever, a guy that's done a lot of work around here. And he had talked to us, and I sat there and I was like, I can go one of two directions. I can either kiss a lot of ass or I can keep it real. And I wanted to keep it real. And I remember we did a segment that day about Rick Pitino, and I was on Rick Pitino's tush about a guy transferring and how I was mad that, Pitino talks a big game on these guys, but they're not very good, whatever. And the consultant that had been at ESPN Radio was like, that was excellent. And then I got a call. And it was like, well, why would you say that? Why the blah, 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 blah? And it wasn't from Pitino, but it was from somebody close to Pitino. And that was when I learned. There's one of two choices. I can either be friends with people or I can keep it real. And I honestly try to be as cordial as possible, in real life. Hey, it's not personal, it's sports. But I understand that, if Vrabel were to get up at the press conference every day and say, Jared Stillman stinks, I'm not sure I'd like that very much. But again, I'm trying to do my job. And my job is to keep it real. And so that I think I felt pretty good about. So as far as that you want him to answer questions, but the reason I go to those press conferences is because I believe it is fair for the coach, the GM, whoever it may be, if they want to correct something, if they want to take umbrage with something, I'm there. That's why I go. So make of that what you will. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game, Twice Daily. You know I love them. The 12 Days of Christmas are back at Twice Daily. Get ready for 12 days of discounts and freebies, plus contests to win fun prizes and gift cards, too. Download the Twice Daily app and register today. If the Titans score any points in the last 2 minutes of either half Sunday against the Seahawks, there is a free half sub the next day for all loyalty members through the app. And again, this will be for Monday. So this guy got scored in the last 2 minutes of either half. That's right. Again, download the Twice Daily app, join the loyalty program to unlock specials, discounts, savings, and so much more. It pays to be a member with Twice Daily, where you earn points and save money with every visit. If you're looking for convenience, Twice Daily has you covered. Twice Daily, fresh all day. Predators Game Day is presented by TJ Anderson Homes and Benchmark Realty, online at tjandersonhomes.com. TJ Anderson, get your house seen, heard, and sold. The Predators tonight taking on the Vancouver Canucks right here at Bridgestone Arena, 7 o'clock right here on 102.5 and 106.3 The Game. Vancouver is 21-9-2, good for 44 points. They actually have been quite a revelation out there out west. The Predators 18-13-0, good for 36 points. Ian, I can't ever remember the Predators going this late into the season without losing in overtime.
Yeah, that is pretty rare.
Now, a lot of that is because Philip Forsberg scores about 4 seconds every time they drop the puck in overtime, as he has the last 2 games, and the Predators are entering on a 4-game win streak. Meanwhile, for Vancouver, they've got points in their last 6 where they've gone 5-0-1. I'll just tell you this right now. When Barry was here, before we went on air, he was like, this is a rough stretch that's upcoming. And then when we were on air, he was like, this is a rough stretch that's upcoming. So this is going to be kind of a tough little go-round as they get into the Christmas holiday between here and Philadelphia. And so tonight they take on Vancouver. Now, taking a look at the playoffs, I feel really, really good looking at the standings because the Predators are 5 points clear of a playoff spot, and St. Louis only has 1 game in hand. So I feel fairly confident that the Predators are probably going to be right there in the end for a playoff spot or comfortably make the playoffs. I mean, I feel fine about the playoffs. But then I go to moneypuck.com, and MoneyPuck gives the Predators a 38.7% chance to make the playoffs. Only a 30. You're telling me that a 1 in 3 chance to make the playoffs? They're clear by 5 points right now. How that?
Long way to go.
That doesn't make any sense to me. Somebody explain that to me about how I feel good about this team. And again, big one tonight against a very good Vancouver team. Max has you set for the pregame show coming up next. And, of course, we'll have the puck drop right here, 7 o'clock on 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Stillman and company. We will see everybody tomorrow at 2.